Alyssa Carter thought her first night as a high school cheerleader would be unforgettable, but not like this. In the shadows of the locker room, jealous teammates cut her hair, mocking the very thing that made her proud. What they didn't know was that Alyssa had been raised by a Navy SEAL father, trained to fight battles far greater than pom-poms and pep rallies. As the cruelty escalates, and the whole town watches, will Alyssa break under the weight of racism, or rise as a symbol of unshakable resilience? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The gym smelled like waxed floors and adrenaline. Alyssa Carter stood on the painted sideline, palms slick, ponytail high, the ends of her curls freshly moisturized and coiled like tight springs catching the light. She could feel the bass drum thudding through the bleachers as students found their seats for the first pep rally of the year. She had rehearsed every count, every toe touch, every smile until her cheeks ached in the mirror. This was supposed to be her first moment. Hers, and she breathed in the noise like courage. "Keep it tidy, Alyssa," Coach Whitmore murmured, as the squad filed into formation. "Uniformity is our brand." Alyssa nodded, though the words landed differently on her than on the others. Uniformity. She had heard it twice this week, once from a teammate who'd suggested she slick it down like the rest of us, and again from a guidance counselor who'd called her hair a distraction from the routine. She smiled anyway because smiling felt like armor. The gym lights dimmed, the music blasted, and the squad burst into their opening sequence. Alyssa's muscle memory clicked. 5, 6, 7, 8, and she lifted into a perfect high V, core tight, feet pointed. The crowd roared. She flew into a jump, turned, landed clean, and caught Kelsey's glance at the edge of her vision. The glance wasn't encouragement. It was a measuring look, like a ruler pressed against her presence. As they moved into the pyramid, Alyssa steadied the base with quiet strength. On the top, Madison Vale, the captain, flashed her pageant smile, the one that never reached her eyes. "Stronghold," Alyssa whispered to her base partner. "I've got you." But the counts shifted. Just a half beat, and Alyssa felt it, the way someone moves a step on a staircase you're sure is there. Madison hit her pose early, throwing the rhythm. Alyssa adjusted mid-breath, saving the shape. The crowd saw only sparkle and motion. Alyssa felt the microaggression in the air like a cold spot. From the bleachers came the whispers. "Is that the new girl?" a woman's voice asked. "The one from the apartment off Harmon?" "She's different." A boy snickered. "Did they recruit her? Or is this a quota thing?" Another voice, muffled, eager. "Her hair is huge. It's blocking the back row." Alyssa caught fragments and kept moving. She refused to look up. She refused to let her face tell on her heart. When the routine ended, the gym thundered, and her spine lit up with pride. For a second, the sound washed away everything else. She had been good. Good in a way that felt like truth. Back in the hall that led to the locker room, the air cooled. The laughter and warm noise of the gym receded behind concrete and doors. Madison's voice slid in, sweet and thin. "Nice debut," she said, tapping her fingernail against a metal locker, as if keeping time on an invisible metronome. "Just watch the volume next time." Her eyes flicked to Alyssa's curls. "It's within regulation," Alyssa replied, steady. "Same as your extensions." Kelsey smirked. "Extensions are neat. Some things aren't." Coach Whitmore walked by, keys jangling, a clipboard pressed to her chest. "5 minutes, ladies. Be respectful with the facilities." She kept walking. She did not look. Inside the locker room, steam rose in clouds from the showers. Somewhere, a faucet dripped. Alyssa set her duffel down, hands trembling now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She tugged out her hoodie, wanting the cocoon of cotton, wanting invisibility. The door clicked. She turned. Madison, Kelsey, and Breyer stood in the frame, the fluorescent light flattening their faces. "We need to talk about standards," Madison said, holding up a pair of silver scissors, the ones Coach used to trim stray threads from uniforms. "You want to be part of this team, right?" Alyssa's mouth went dry. "What are you doing with those?" "Helping," Kelsey said. "You stood out too much. That's not what a team does." Alyssa glanced at the row of doors along the back wall. No other voices, no echo of Coach's shoes. "Step back," she said, voice low. "I'm not your problem." Breyer moved closer, voice barely above a whisper. "It's not personal. It's just image." Madison's smile sharpened. "You're welcome, by the way. If we didn't care, we wouldn't fix this." Alyssa's fingers dug into the edge of her locker until her knuckles blanched. "Don't touch me." "We won't," Madison answered. "We'll touch the distraction." The first snip sounded small, like a thread breaking in a quiet room. It took Alyssa a heartbeat to register that a coil had fallen to the tile. She flinched, every instinct telling her to shove back, to scream, but the locker room was a world built on repercussions that always seemed to find girls like her first. Her breath stuttered. "See? Already better," Kelsey said. Another lock fell. The scissors flashed again, and Alyssa swallowed a sob that felt like swallowing a shard of glass. She stared at her reflection in the metal locker. A warped silhouette, hair uneven, eyes burning. She tasted metal in her mouth, the taste of fear and humiliation, and something ancient. "Stop," she forced out, quiet but edged. "You don't get to do this to me." Madison paused as if considering mercy, then snipped again. "Now you won't embarrass the squad." A stall door creaked. A teammate. Jenna stood frozen halfway out, phone held to her chest. Her gaze bounced from Alyssa to Madison to the scissors. "Guys," Jenna said, voice shaking. "This is messed up." Kelsey's head snapped. "Do you want to make Captain mad? Put your phone away." Jenna's hand trembled, the phone slipping into her pocket. She did not leave. She did not help. She did not speak again. Alyssa felt the betrayal like a draft on wet skin. It ended not with an apology, but with the soft clatter of scissors on a bench and the crumpled constellation of curls on the floor. Madison exhaled satisfied. "Now you match," she said, turning to go. Alyssa asked, "Match what?" Madison didn't turn. Expectations. The door swung, then thunked shut. The silence left behind had texture. Alyssa stooped, gathering handfuls of her hair with careful fingers. As if the gentleness might reverse what had happened, she pressed the curls into a plastic grocery bag from her duffel and tied it tight. Her reflection in the mirror above the sinks wavered, an uneven hemline around her head, jagged as a torn page. The pride she had held during the routine drained out of her, leaving a hollow that echoed. Her phone buzzed. A notification lit the screen, a new post in a private student group. An edited photo from the rally with a caption, "When the new girl auditions for blow dryer." The laugh emojis blinked, multiplying. Another post. Someone had filmed a snippet of the routine and spliced in a sound effect. Sheep bleating when her face appeared. Her jaw clenched. She set the phone face down. Then the ache rose, the one she'd kept jammed behind her ribs. She sank onto the bench and let the first tear fall. It surprised her with its heat. "You didn't break," she whispered to herself, the words barely air. "You don't break." Across the room, the locker at the end of the row hung slightly open. Inside, taped to the door, was a folded sheet labeled Apparent Standards, Revised. Alyssa stepped nearer, eyes scanning. New text had been added in pen beneath the typed lines. Hair must be neat and uniform. Styles that distract from performance should be adjusted at coach's discretion. The handwriting was careful, practiced. It looked like coach's. Alyssa's stomach turned. She had thought the scissors were an act of rogue cruelty. Now she wondered whether the room itself had been set like a trap. She pulled her hoodie over her head, tucking the unevenness beneath the cotton. Her feet moved on their own. Out the door, down the hall, past a cluster of teachers discussing weekend plans, as if the day hadn't turned into a before and after for her. At the far exit, a janitor propped the door with his cart. He glanced at her face, and then away as if recognizing a grief that wasn't safe to know. She muttered a thank you and stepped into the late afternoon light, the sun flaring wincingly bright. Outside, the world kept spinning. A tangle of students spilled onto the lawn, laughing, their conversations eddying around her like she was a rock in a fast stream. Alyssa kept her head down. Her hands shook when she pulled open the car door. She slid in, pressed her forehead to the steering wheel and let herself cry the way she hadn't allowed in the locker room. Shoulders heaving, breath a broken metronome. She cried until there was nothing left but an exhausted tremor. When the tears ran out, a small, hard shape remained in her chest. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't acceptance. It was something she recognized only because she had seen it in her father's face when he talked about cold oceans and long nights. Resolve. She wiped her eyes and took a slow breath. She would not vanish. She would not give them that. At home, the porch light was already on, even though the sky still held color. Marcus Carter had a habit of turning it on early, a lighthouse instinct he never shed. Alyssa parked crooked and sat for a moment, believing in the impossible magic of time if she stayed still enough. Maybe the day would rewind. Maybe the locker room scene would dissolve like steam. The front door opened before she could reach for the knob. Marcus stood in the frame, a dish towel thrown over his shoulder, the smell of garlic and onions floating behind him. "You're late," he said, not unkindly. "Everything good?" "Practice ran long," she answered, the lie flat on her tongue. She kept the hood up. "Food's on the stove," he said, stepping aside. He didn't press. He never did. Not at first. He believed in giving a person room to bring their truth to the surface on their own. Alyssa walked past him, eyes on the floorboards she had helped him sand last spring. In the hallway mirror, a sliver of her profile betrayed her. A ragged line near the temple, an absence where there should have been fullness. She tucked the loose piece deeper under the hood and went straight to her room, fingers white around the plastic bag inside her duffel. She placed the bag on her desk and stood over it, as if it could offer some instruction. Down the hall, the clink of cutlery and the low hum of the television tried to offer normal. Marcus set 2 plates, then paused, head tilted. He had learned to listen for silence in a house the way he used to listen for currents at sea. This silence had a different pitch. He wiped his hands, went to the hallway, and stopped at Alyssa's door. He didn't knock. He listened. Inside, Alyssa pressed her palms flat on the desktop, breathing carefully to hold the day in one piece. She heard his weight shift on the floorboards. She turned the plastic bag over so the tied end faced away from the door. When she finally opened the door, she tried to keep her chin up the way he taught her, the way he said courage sometimes looks like posture. Marcus took in the hood, the stiffness, the redness around her eyes, that no hoodie could hide. The muscle in his jaw twitched, then went still. "Long practice," he said again, softly this time, as if testing whether the lie could carry its own weight. Alyssa forced a smile that didn't find her eyes. "I'm fine, Dad." He held her gaze a breath longer than usual, as if searching a horizon only he could see. Something in his posture changed. The slightest lean forward, the readiness of a man who hears a distant alarm. He stepped aside to let her pass toward the kitchen, but his hand hovered an inch from her shoulder, not touching, sensing. She moved by, steadying her voice. "I'll wash up." Marcus nodded, but his eyes flicked past her into the room and landed on the corner of the desk where the edge of a plastic bag peeked out, the faintest coil of dark hair visible through it, like a secret caught in light. He didn't say a word. His gaze returned to his daughter's hooded face, and the quiet between them tightened. "Liz," he said, voice low and even, a tone he reserved for when the water got rough. "What happened to you today?" The question hung in the hall like a wire. "Liz, what happened to you today?" Marcus didn't step in or reach for the hood. He gave her the space he'd always given her, even when she was little and came home from first grade, with crayon marks on her arms, where a classmate had tried to scrub away her brown. He waited for her to decide if the truth could survive the air between them. Alyssa swallowed. "Nothing I can't handle." The sentence tried to stand up straight and folded on itself. She slipped past him into the kitchen. Smell of sautéed garlic suddenly too bright. She pulled the hood tighter, sat at the table, and stared at the steam rising off the pasta like it might write a script she could read. Marcus set a glass of water in front of her, then took the chair opposite, forearms on his knees, eyes level. "Okay," he said softly, "then we'll handle it together." He nodded toward her breath, not her hood. "Box breathing. Remember, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out." His tone wasn't a command. It was the voice he used when waves pitched too high on a small boat, steady, boring on purpose. She closed her eyes and followed the corners of his count, air grazing the raw edges of humiliation. On the 4th cycle, her back loosened. On the 5th, the heat behind her eyes cooled enough to let words through. "They cut my hair," she said, and the 4 words rang a hollow note, the way a bell sounds after a strike. He didn't flinch. The only movement was the smallest shift of his jaw, a tight muscle acknowledging impact. "Who?" The question was quiet. Data gathering, a habit carved by years of debriefs. "Madison," with Kelsey and Breyer behind her. The names made the kitchen feel smaller. In the locker room, Coach's scissors. Marcus's gaze flicked briefly to the hall, where the edge of the plastic bag still peeked from her room like a witness. He looked back at Alyssa. "Did anyone try to stop it?" "Jenna saw. She didn't. I don't know what she did." Alyssa's voice thinned. "Dad, they called it standards." She swallowed. "Coach has something taped inside a locker. Revisions. About hair." The word startled her with how exposed it felt on her tongue, like a soft animal set in a cold room. He nodded once. "Okay." He let the okay sit, not as acceptance but as a place to put panic down. Eat for a few minutes. We'll talk after. He rose, rinsed a dish he'd already washed, and set it on the rack again. Old muscle memory. Do something simple when your hands want to shake. He had been 20 when the Navy recruiter told him. Discipline is freedom, and it sounded like a riddle. He had been 21 and standing in the Pacific at 4:00 a.m., water needling his bones, when he learned the riddle was true. In BOHCS, no one cared about last names, until they did. Some insults came blunt as a baton, others came dressed as standards. He could still feel the cold of the barber chair on his neck. The week an instructor decided his 5 o'clock shadow violated regs, and made him shave dry in front of the class, a safety razor skipping across his skin, while the room watched. Close enough to see yourself, the instructor had murmured, handing him the mirror like a test. It hadn't been about shaving, it had been about watching a black man bleed under fluorescent lights, and call it preparation. He didn't tell Alyssa that yet. He watched her fork pasta without tasting it, then set the fork down and fold her hands as if to keep them from spilling. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. I wanted to scream. My body wanted to knock the scissors away, and my brain kept saying, don't do it. Don't give them the story they want. Marcus breathed out through his nose, a sound too quiet to be a sigh. You chose restraint, he said. That's not nothing. It felt like nothing. She met his eyes. I picked my hair up off the floor and put it in a bag like it was trash. She flinched at her own word. I hate that I did that. He shook his head. You protected evidence. That's not trash. He tilted his chin toward the hallway. May I? She nodded. He walked to her room, paused in the doorway like someone approaching a sacred object, and lifted the plastic bag with both hands. He held it at eye level. The curls were dark galaxies, caught in clear sky. He set the bag gently on the kitchen table between them. This is a record, he said, of what was taken, and of what they couldn't take. Alyssa barely whispered. What couldn't they take? Marcus gave her a small, almost private smile. Your say-so. She stared at the bag, then at her father, as if expecting anger to detonate. It didn't. He sat, the same way he sat after missions, when men brought back pieces of a night they were still learning how to carry. I'm going to tell you something. I don't tell many people, he said. I earned my trident in a class where I had to be twice as perfect to be called average. That's not self-pity. That's math. His eyes went distant and present at once. A teammate once told me, your face reflects sweat wrong, Carter. Looks like anger. I laughed so I wouldn't drown. So you get it, Alyssa said. But it wasn't a question. It was a bridge she wanted to test for weight. I get it, he said. A PO made me reshave until my skin burned, because he said my beard shadow read unprofessional in a team photo. Later that same photo went up on a wall, and they cropped me out. He let the sentence lay there, ordinary and brutal. So I kept the original in my footlocker to remind me, the frame isn't the truth. He stood and left the room. When he returned, he carried a dented metal footlocker he hadn't opened in years. He set it on the floor, unlatching it with the reverence of someone cracking a seal on a memory that had been under pressure. Inside lay folded uniforms, a faded team shirt, a coil of paracord, and a small resealable bag. Alyssa blinked. The bag held short, coarse curls the color of his hair, saved from the barber chair years ago, a relic Alyssa never knew existed.
You kept it?
Her voice was disbelief and recognition braided together. I kept it, he said simply, not because I wanted to live in that moment, but because I wanted a map back to who I was before they tried to draw me different. He placed his bag beside hers on the table, two small constellations aligned. Pain can be an heirloom if you let it. Or a tool. Alyssa exhaled, a sound that included grief and a kind of awe. The kitchen light found the plastic seams and threw back tiny prisms. She felt a link she hadn't expected. The cut wasn't a private humiliation. It was part of a longer story she hadn't volunteered to join, but could choose how to write. Marcus leaned back, hands folded as if at a briefing. You know why I had you sit still for 60 seconds every night when you were 8? He asked. Because you said silence is a muscle. A small smile tugged at her mouth. And because I was a hurricane. You were a beautiful hurricane, he corrected. I wanted you to know how to lower your own wind. You learned to count your breath without looking at the clock. You learned to hold your ground. He tipped his head toward the garage. And the rope climbs, the sandbag carries, those weren't about being tough. They were about control. Discipline isn't a cage, it's an exit. Alyssa looked past him, through the glass pane in the back door, to the garage where the rope still hung from a beam, and a whiteboard listed old goals in fading marker. 10 strict pull-ups, 2-minute plank, 5 quiet minutes. I thought you were training me to be like you, she said, almost apologetic. I was training you to be you, he said. Me just happened to be my practice dummy. He paused. And I made mistakes. I taught you to brace. And maybe I didn't teach you to ask for help loud enough. She rubbed at her eyes with her sleeve. I didn't want you to think I failed. He gave a tiny laugh that wasn't joy. Failure is falling, and hiding the bruise. What you did was survive the hit, and walk home. A silence settled, deeper and kinder. Alyssa picked up the bag again, the weight of it small and huge. They said it was about standards. She repeated, more to herself, like there's a rule book that only applies to me. Marcus nodded. Standards are useful until they become a disguise for bias. He breathed. You know the phrase we used to say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You don't have to sprint to win this. You have to be precise. Her eyes lifted, curiosity threading through caution. Precise how? He tapped the table twice, thinking. First we document. Dates, times, who was there. We keep the hair, we photograph the locker, notice. Second, we rebuild you where they aimed. Your sense of self, not just your head. Third, we decide what we want from the school. Accountability, not spectacle. Alyssa's shoulders squared. I want them to see what they did. I want them to feel it. They might not, he said, but we can make it so they can't ignore it. He glanced at the stove clock, then back at her. And tomorrow morning, we go back to drills. She winced. Dad, not punishment, he said quickly. Practice. Before the sun comes up, when the world can't see us, you and me. Breath, rope, words. He nodded toward the hall closet. We'll add something new to the garage wall. Your own rules. 3 lines. She leaned in, despite herself. What are they? You write them, he said, but I can offer drafts. 1. I will not negotiate my worth to be made comfortable for others. 2. I will not let an audience decide my next move. 3. I will move with intention, not apology. He watched her absorb the language, the way he had watched younger teammates memorize a map. Her throat worked around a thought she hadn't wanted to name. I almost quit today, she said. The admission felt like removing a splinter. I would have driven you home if you had, he said, gentle. Quitting a place that hurts you isn't surrender, it's triage. What matters is whose decision it is. He paused. Is cheer still yours? She thought of the moment on the court when her body remembered counts, and the crowd's roar shook the dust off her fear. I think so, she said. But I don't want to stand next to them and pretend nothing happened. You won't, he said. We'll make sure pretending is no longer an option. She hesitated, then added, the handwriting on that locker notice. It looked like Coach's. Saying it out loud made the floor tilt. If she knew, he said, then she owes us honesty and daylight. He didn't curse. He didn't pound the table. He steadied his voice. We'll ask. We'll record answers. Something inside her aligned with his restraint, like bones clicking back into joint. She reached into the footlocker, touched the faded team shirt with her fingertips, and asked, Did you ever want to quit? Plenty, he said. But I learned there's a difference between quitting and choosing a different fight. When they cropped me out of that photo, I stopped trying to be visible in rooms that wanted my work but not my face. I decided to build rooms. He gestured around them. This is one. Alyssa's gaze drifted to the 2 bags on the table. I don't want this to be our heirloom, she said. It won't be, he answered. It'll be a landmark. She nodded slowly, then surprised herself. Can I keep both? He smiled. Yes. She gathered the bags, pressed them together like pages in a book. I don't know how to go back to school tomorrow and not feel small. Feeling small and being small aren't the same, he said. When you walk in, see yourself at your full height in your head first. If you can't borrow my picture of you, until yours returns. Her lips trembled into a half smile that wasn't quite a smile but was no longer defeat. What if I shake? Then you shake, he said, and you breathe on the corners like we just did? From the living room, the muted newscaster's voice drifted, followed by the soft chime of a text on Marcus's phone, on the counter. He flipped it over. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, and a message that slid ice under the door. Coach Whitmore here. We should discuss Alyssa's appearance issue before it escalates. Marcus's eyes met his daughter's, and a new line appeared in his face. Not anger, exactly, but a decision forming. He locked the phone, placed it face down, and stood. Tomorrow we run the hill, he said. Then we talk to the school. In that order. Alyssa rose with him, something reclaimed stacking inside her like bricks mortared with breath. She pulled the hood back. The unevenness showed in all its honest, painful geometry. Marcus looked directly at it, not away. You're still you, he said. It doesn't feel like it, she whispered. That's the trick, he answered, and his voice went even quieter, the way voices do before dawn. You don't know it yet, but this isn't the end. It's the beginning. The next morning arrived before Alyssa was ready for it. She had woken before dawn, following Marcus out to the driveway, where the morning air bit sharp against her lungs. They ran the hill together in silence, breath puffing like smoke, the ground damp from night rain. She wanted to believe the ritual would armor her for what waited at school, but as soon as she stepped onto the campus sidewalk, the stares began. The first pair of eyes caught her before she even reached the main doors. A cluster of juniors by the flagpole, whispering into cupped hands, laughter spilling like coins clinking in an empty jar. Alyssa's hood sat heavy against the back of her neck. She had promised herself she wouldn't wear it inside, no matter how uneven her hair felt against her skin, so she let the hood stay down, exposing the jagged edges. Every step from the sidewalk to the entrance felt like crossing a spotlight stage, even though the morning sun was already high. Inside, the noise of the halls swelled. Her phone buzzed in her backpack like a warning signal. But she didn't reach for it. She already knew what it would be. Memes, posts, maybe even the video again. The echo of laughter followed her as she passed the cafeteria doors. On the table by the vending machines, 3 students hunched over a phone. One raised it just enough for her to see, a screenshot of her mid-cheer, hair uneven, with the caption, "When the squad forgets to bring hedge clippers." Alyssa looked away quickly, but not before one of them muttered, "She should have stayed in band." Their laughter blended into the hallway's background noise, but it clung to her like smoke. By third period, the whispers were louder than the bell. Even students she had never spoken to tilted their heads as she passed, studying her like a museum exhibit. Some expressions were cruel, smirks, sneers, others were blank curiosity, as though she were a glitch in their morning routine. But what hurt more were the ones that feigned pity. The tilted brows and half-sympathetic sighs, the kind that whispered, "Poor girl," but did nothing else. In English class, the teacher, Mrs. Langston, glanced at Alyssa as she slid into her desk. Her eyes lingered a moment on the uneven hairline. Then she said, "Girls can be cruel sometimes. Just keep your head down, Alyssa. Focus on your assignment." It was a dismissal disguised as kindness. Alyssa felt the weight of the words. Girls can be cruel. Not, what they did was wrong. Not, how can we make this right? Just keep your head down. As if silence and compliance could bandage humiliation. At lunch, she carried her tray to a table in the corner, hoping for invisibility, but even invisibility had been stolen from her. A group of seniors passed by, one of them loudly humming the buzzing sound of clippers. The others burst out laughing. Alyssa kept her eyes on her food, though her stomach had already knotted too tight to swallow. Across the cafeteria, Madison sat at the center of her table. The cheer squad clustered around her like satellites. They were laughing, tossing fries into each other's mouths, casual and carefree. Not one of them looked in Alyssa's direction. That, she realized, was the sharpest knife, not the open mockery, but the practiced indifference, the kind that turned her into something less than worth acknowledging. Later, between classes, the sting became sharper. A boy leaned into her path near the science wing. "Hey," he said, tilting his phone so she could see. On his screen was a TikTok, a loop of her pep rally performance, edited so that every time she jumped, the sound effect of sheep bleating filled the speakers. The caption read, "New mascot." She brushed past him, heart pounding, the laughter of his friends echoing down the hall. The cruelty wasn't just from students. In gym, Coach Whitmore called the squad to stretch before practice. Alyssa slipped into formation quietly, her body still sore from that morning's hill run. The whispers started among her teammates immediately. "She really showed up like that," someone muttered. Coach blew her whistle and cut the chatter, but her eyes flicked across Alyssa and lingered. "Ladies," Coach said, "presentation matters. We represent the school, the community, and ourselves. I expect you all to maintain a polished image. She didn't name Alyssa, but the message needed no address. The other girls smirked at the floor. Alyssa stared at the mat, her pulse hot in her ears. She wanted to scream that her hair was not a costume, not a flaw to be polished. Instead, she swallowed the ache and stretched her arms overhead, her movements sharp, her silence sharper. By the end of the day, she felt like she was walking underwater. Each classroom was a new current, pulling her down, each teacher's indifference a weight. In history, a boy behind her whispered, "Poodle," and flicked a pencil shaving onto her desk. She brushed it away without turning around. The teacher continued lecturing, never looking up. But what struck her hardest wasn't the names, the laughter, or the edited videos. It was the way the school itself folded around the cruelty, letting it pass unchallenged. White students walked into class late and were greeted with chuckles. Alyssa walked in on time and received silence. A white girl with her hair dyed pink was called artistic. Alyssa's natural curls, uneven and raw from violation, were called unprofessional. That evening, when the final bell rang, she moved toward her locker with the heavy steps of someone carrying a secret weight. The hallway was thinning, students scattering toward buses and cars. She wanted only to grab her books and go. Her fingers reached for the dial, spinning it to the familiar combination. The lock clicked open. She pulled at the handle and froze. Across the metal door, in thick black permanent marker, someone had scrawled the words, "Go back where you belong." The letters were jagged, rushed, but bold enough to catch anyone's eye. Alyssa's breath caught, her throat tightened, but no sound came. Around her, a few students slowed, glancing at the locker, then at her, then quickly away as though looking too long might make them complicit. She lifted her hand, almost touched the ink, then let it fall. The words stared back, searing themselves into her memory. For a moment, the hallway seemed to tilt. Then, at the far end of the hall, she saw Jenna, the same girl who had watched in silence during the scissors incident, standing by the exit doors, her phone in her hand again, eyes wide as if she had been caught between guilt and courage. Alyssa blinked, her pulse spiking. Was Jenna filming this too? Or was she finally ready to speak? The hallway emptied, leaving Alyssa alone with the inked words, and the faint hum of Jenna's phone camera light, glinting in the distance. Alyssa's chest heaved as she turned toward Jenna, uncertain if the girl was about to expose her further, or finally take her side. Jenna's phone light hovered like a tiny moon at the end of the hall. Alyssa stood rooted before the locker door, the ink still wet enough to gleam. For a second her chest wanted to sprint and her feet wanted to bolt, and the two impulses canceled into stillness. She heard her father's voice inside the noise. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, and caught the corners of her breath like a rope. Jenna's steps clicked closer. "I'm not filming you," she said quickly, soft but urgent. "I'm filming this, for evidence." She raised the phone to show the screen, the hateful message framed cleanly, time-stamped. "I should have done this yesterday." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "You were there," she said, the words flat, not accusation, just fact. "I know." Jenna swallowed. "I froze. I thought it would blow over if nobody said anything. I was wrong." She glanced over her shoulder, as if the hallway itself could eavesdrop. "I have something else." Alyssa didn't answer. Her eyes dropped again to the words on the metal. "Go back where you belong." The letters blurred, then sharpened, a tide rolling and pulling, a tide. Her mind unspooled a memory with a tug so sudden it felt like a current around the ankles. Cold water up to her ribs, 9 years old, too small for the wetsuit and too stubborn for the shore. Marcus knee-deep, beside her, hand easy on her shoulder. "Raid the water before you fight it," he'd said, voice steady over the hiss of shore break. "What do you see?" "Waves," she'd shivered. "What else?" She had squinted. "Ripples. A darker band where the sand dropped. The pull where foam ran back harder than it ran in. It's moving sideways," she'd answered. "Good," he'd said. "When it drags you out, don't sprint straight against it. Turn, go with it, until you're clear. Then angle back in. Lateral saves breath, breath saves you." In the hallway now, Alyssa blinked, the world returning around her. She lifted her eyes to Jenna. "What do you have?" Jenna's fingers trembled as she tapped her phone. A group chat opened. Viper's profile pics of familiar faces, green and gray bubbles stacked like evidence. Alyssa read the thread. "If she wants to look natural, We'll help. Coach won't say it out loud. We'll call it standards. A timestamp the night before the pep rally. Long before any scissors touched tile. Her stomach flipped. Send it to me, she said. Her voice surprised her. Calm, layerless. Jenna airdropped the screenshots. Alyssa's phone buzzed in her pocket with each small arrival like a heartbeat steadying. I'm sorry, Jenna whispered. I didn't. Not now, Alyssa said, gentler than the words sounded. Later. She glanced toward the ceiling corner where a camera should have been. An empty bracket. The twist hit like a cold splash. Where's the camera? Jenna's face went pale. Maintenance, she said. Principal Markham said the East Hall cams are down all week. She paused. I think Madison's mom is on the PTA technology committee. Alyssa tasted metal again. The school's arteries ran smoother for some than others, and the blood always seemed to pool at the same feet. Send me a photo of the bracket, too, she said. Jenna obeyed. The frame clicked. Another receipt. Whispers stirred at the far end of the hall. Footsteps. Alyssa didn't look up. She photographed the words on her locker 3 times. Different angles. A wide shot to show location. She didn't touch the ink. Lateral, not head-on. Turn with the pull until you're clear. Come to the office with me, Jenna said. I'll say I saw who did it. Did you? Alyssa asked. Jenna's eyes flicked down. No. Then before the shame could settle, she blurted, I'm Coach Whitmore's niece. The confession dropped between them like a dull weight. She's my mom's sister. I didn't want to be disloyal. For a heartbeat, the hallway's fluorescent lights hummed louder than any voice. Alyssa felt rage lift a fist inside her, and then set it down. Unexpectedly, the truth didn't crack her. It clarified the picture. Nepotism woven into silence. Standards outsourced to family loyalty. Not fairness. It didn't excuse Jenna. It explained her shape. You're late, Alyssa said simply. But you're here. Jenna nodded. A quick, grateful exhale escaping her like a leak. I'll go with you, she repeated. Alyssa nodded toward the office, then paused. She slid her phone from her pocket, opened the camera again, and recorded a slow pan, the bracket with no camera, the busy hallway emptying, the message on her locker. She narrated in a low, steady voice, not for social media, but for memory. August, East Hall. Locker 312. Camera bracket empty. Message in permanent marker. No staff present. Her hand didn't shake. The training was holding. In the main office, air conditioning breathed too cold. The secretary glanced up with a smile that dulled when she recognized Alyssa. Yes? My locker was vandalized, Alyssa said. I want to report it. Kids get silly at the start of the year, the woman said, already turning toward a notepad. We'll have maintenance paint over it. I need a written report, Alyssa said, voice still even. And I want to know why the hall camera is down. The secretary's pen paused. Facilities schedule. Routine. She eyed Jenna. Coach is in the gym if this is teen drama. It's harassment, Alyssa said. The word weighed more than she did, but she let it rest on the counter, and evidence tampering if the cameras were taken down for non-routine reasons. A door opened. Vice Principal Kellogg emerged, coffee cup in hand, tie slightly askew. What's this? Locker vandalism, the secretary said. Girls being girls. Kellogg offered a chuckle that aimed for reassurance and landed on dismissal. Let's not throw big words around. We'll handle it. Alyssa, right? You're new to the squad. Transitions are hard on everyone. Being called out of my place on school property isn't a transition, she said. It's a violation. She felt Marcus in the room with her, slow as smooth. I'm documenting everything. I prefer to include your names as helpful. He blinked, recalibrating. There's no need to get adversarial. There's a need to get accurate, she said. I'd also like to know who authored the revised appearance standards in the locker room. The handwriting looks like faculty. Kellogg's smile held, but his eyes cooled. Appearance guidelines are coach's purview. If you feel singled out, perhaps consider how to integrate more smoothly. We want everyone to feel comfortable. Alyssa looked at the cup in his hand, the pale crescent of coffee cooling at the rim. She thought of rain. Another memory unfolded. A sky slate gray, storm coming, pavement shining. Marcus had laced her shoes tight and tapped the knot. We don't wait out every storm, he'd said, rain needling their cheeks. Sometimes we run through it. If you keep your head up, you'll see puddles before you step. Down is for defeat, forward is for choices. They had run until their clothes clung and water ran into their eyes. Listen, he'd said as cars hissed by and thunder stitched the hills. Rain doesn't hate you. It's indifferent. The world often is. You decide what the indifference carves out of you. In the office's fluorescent light, Alyssa wiped her palms against her jeans, lifted her chin. I'll email the principal my report and CC the district equity liaison, she said. She didn't ask. She stated a course. Kellogg's nod was small and reluctant. Do as you feel is necessary. We'll get maintenance on the locker. She stepped back into the hall with Jenna, heart suddenly thudding against her ribs now that the air wasn't refrigerated flat. Jenna exhaled. You didn't yell, she said, half awe, half question. Yelling is straight against a rip, Alyssa said. Seedways works better. They passed the bulletin board outside the gym, the cheer team's photo grid. Alyssa's square, taken on tryout day, looked different than the others. Not because of her, because of the frame. The crop shaved a sliver off her shoulder, cut the curls close. The others had breathing room, a detail so petty, it might escape the untrained eye. To Alyssa, it thudded like a stamp. She thought of the team photo Marcus, kept in his footlocker, the one a wall had shortened. The room wanted the work, not the person. Her phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. If you can't handle a joke, don't be in the spotlight. A second later, standards are standards. A third, a knife emoji. Not a threat. Exactly, but a cut meant to make her flinch. She saved the number, screenshot the thread, attached timestamps. Jenna watched her do it and pressed her lips together. I texted my aunt, she said almost to herself. I told her this is wrong. She swallowed. She said, we'll talk at practice. Good, Alyssa said, even as the word felt fragile. Talk is where excuses live. I'm not taking any this time. They reached her locker again. The words still shouted without sound. Alyssa opened the door and pulled out her history book and a small spiral notebook she'd barely used. She wrote 3 lines on its first page, the pen biting a little too hard into the paper, because her hand hadn't fully calmed. I will not negotiate my worth. I will not let an audience decide my next move. I will move with intention, not apology. She felt silly and strong at once, like someone planting a flag on a small private hill. The hallway thinned further. Last buses, last cars. Jenna lingered. Do you want me to come to practice with you now? She asked. I want you to forward me the email you just sent your aunt, Alyssa said. She kept her tone soft enough to leave room for growth. And then I want you to decide which side you're going to stand on when people look. I'm on yours, Jenna whispered. Then stand, Alyssa said. No malice, just a directive. A metallic clang echoed from the gym. The sound of a storage cage closing. Alyssa's pulse ticked faster. She closed her locker gently, the hateful sentence still visible to anyone who passed. She would not paint over someone else's crime to keep the hallway pretty. As she walked toward the gym, another memory rose. Not wet or cold this time, but dark. The garage at dawn, rope dangling from the ceiling beam, like a question mark. You don't beat the rope, Marcus had said, chalk dust a ghost on his palms. You learn its language. She had learned to tuck her knees and pinch the rope between her shoes, to move without flailing, to pause, to look down without falling apart. Again, he had said when she wanted to drop. Quiet count. She had counted to 5 because anything longer scared her. He had nodded. Then 5 is perfect. Today. In the gym doorway now. She stopped and counted to 5. The squad's voices floated over the squeak of sneakers. Madison's light and sharp. Kelsey's lower. Briar's with a brittle edge. Somewhere under that, Coach Whitmore's whistle. Alyssa watched them through the narrow glass panel a moment before entering the team stretching. Madison laughing with her face tilted to show her perfect profile. Coach's clipboard tucked against her chest like a shield. Jenna hovered behind. Do you want me? Not yet, Alyssa said. If you come in with me, it'll make this about you and her. I need it to be about me and the truth. She stepped inside. Heads turned. Conversations faltered, then resumed with the forced prickly normal that follows a thunderclap no one wants to acknowledge. Coach blew her whistle. Ladies, she called. 2 bright circles. Alyssa joined the nearest circle, and felt bodies lean, a millimeter away, as if her presence were heat. She rotated her ankle, calf, thigh, shoulders, rolling each joint against the memory of scissors. Coach's gaze skated over her, and did not stop. We have to discuss presentation before regionals, Coach said, voice landing like rules read on the first day of class. A few of you need to make adjustments, so we're uniform. Neat is neat, Madison chimed. It's simple. Alyssa stared at the floor for a breath, then lifted her head. You mean me? She said, no water in her voice. No apology. Say my name. The circle's diameter widened a fraction. Coach's mouth thinned. We are not singling anyone out. They already did, Alyssa said. She kept her tone surgical. In writing. Madison's grin glinted. Wow. Sensitive. Coach inhaled, ready to smooth the surface. Alyssa felt the pull to shout, to swing her words like weight. Instead, she turned with the current. I filed a report about my locker, she said, addressing the group as much as the adults. I have screenshots of a chat where people planned what happened in the locker room. She let the words fall like pebbles in a still pond. The ripples were quiet, but they moved. Briar's face drained. Kelsey's mouth opened, then closed. Madison kept smiling, but her eyes narrowed. The first crack in the lacquer. Coach's clipboard tightened against her chest. Jenna's text pinged on Alyssa's phone, a vibration against her hip like a whispered warning. Email forwarded. Also, Aunt Laura knew about the revision before tryouts. I found the draft on her desktop. It's from Madison's mom. Alyssa didn't look down. She could feel the message without reading it. A map forming under her feet. She rotated her wrist, the stretch slow and deliberate. The room felt colder and clearer, the way the ocean feels when you've decided not to drown. Marcus's voice surfaced inside her again. Lateral saves breath. Breath saves you. The whistle dropped to Coach's side. For a long second, nobody moved. Alyssa's heart settled into a calm it had not known since the scissors. She had a plan now. Document. Don't perform. Ask names out loud. Build a record. Refuse the pretty lie. She pictured the 3 lines in her notebook and felt them ink themselves into her posture. She breathed in, held 4, breathed out. Then, without announcing it, without theatrics, she made a promise to herself that felt like an oath whispered to a mirror she finally recognized. I'll fight back, she told herself, so softly that only she could hear it. But not the way they expect. The gym smelled faintly of rubber mats and lemon disinfectant. But underneath that was something heavier. Suspicion. Alyssa felt it the moment she joined the stretching circle. The team moved like one machine on the surface. Matching counts, matching smiles. But the current beneath was jagged. The silence wasn't neutral. It was curated. Every glance, every whisper clipped short when she neared. Her curls, uneven from the scissors, had grown just enough to coil defiantly again. She refused to hide them under a hood at practice, even when she caught Madison's eyes sliding toward them like measuring tape. Madison's smile was sharp, too sweet. At least she's brave, she said once, loud enough for the front row to hear, soft enough to frame it as a compliment. Kelsey giggled on cue. It wasn't bravery they saw. It was a threat. Alyssa knew it now. She had been clean on counts since the pep rally. Her jumps higher, her landings steady. Her strength didn't come from copying their style. It came from the drills her father drilled into her bones. Rope climbs had taught her grip. Sandbag carries had built her core. Every time she held a teammate steady in a stunt, her body was proof of hours they had never spent sweating at dawn. And that terrified them. Hierarchy and cheer worked like a delicate ecosystem. Madison at the top, polished and perfect, was the face. Kelsey and Briar orbiting close, reinforcing her authority with sharp whispers and practiced cruelty. The rest of the squad fell in line, not because they loved Madison, but because she controlled access to spotlight and praise. Alyssa hadn't asked for a place in that system, but her sheer ability bent the balance, and the others felt it like a hairline crack in glass. During one routine, Alyssa nailed a back tuck the first time she tried it. Clean and sharp. Coach's eyes widened just enough for Madison to notice. That night, a new post appeared online. Alyssa midair, captioned, "Careful, don't break the floor." Laughter spiraled in the comments. It wasn't about her weight. She was lean, conditioned. It was about her presence. The idea that someone like her, black, unpolished by Madison standards, could occupy the highest, most visible space in the room. After practice, in the locker room, Kelsey leaned against a bench, her voice dripping casual malice. Uniforms fit better on girls with manageable hair. Just saying. Briar chimed in, smirking. Coach lets her slide because she's new. Fresh faces are exciting. Until they aren't. Alyssa kept her back straight, her face impassive. She folded her clothes deliberately, slow enough that they'd see she wasn't rushing to escape. Inside, her stomach knotted. She remembered her father's words. Silence is a muscle. She was exercising it. But silence didn't make their barbs disappear. It only sharpened them for the next strike. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. The memory of rain, runs with Marcus flickered again. The world is indifferent. You decide what it carves out of you. She decided she wouldn't shrink. But she couldn't ignore that alliances were forming around her. Subtle but certain. In class the next day, she noticed Briar whispering to girls outside the squad basketball players, theater kids. The ripple spread. Alyssa would walk into a room and feel the shift. Whispers cut short. Eyes turning down, smiles folding into smirks. By lunch she understood it wasn't just cheer anymore. It was social sabotage. Madison's reach was longer than the mats. At practice later that week, coach called for pyramid work. Alyssa was assigned as a mid-base, supporting weight, lifting steady. When Madison climbed to the top, her balance wavered. Alyssa tightened her grip, keeping the structure from collapsing. Madison looked down, caught Alyssa's eyes, and instead of gratitude, she smirked. Careful, she whispered, audible only to the base beneath. If you drop me, you'll never cheer again. Alyssa locked her arms, every muscle burning. The pyramid held. Madison hit her pose. The crowd of parents clapped politely from the bleachers. Nobody saw the exchange. Later, as they disassembled, Kelsey brushed past Alyssa, murmuring, "Don't think saving her makes you safe." The words echoed in her chest. She realized then that she wasn't just being mocked. She was being positioned. If anything went wrong, the story would already be written. Her guilt preloaded. That evening, while changing back into her clothes, she overheard two squad members by the showers. Madison says if Alyssa keeps showing off, we'll teach her at the pep rally, something the crowd won't forget. The voice cracked with nervous laughter. The second girl answered, "That's going too far. Not if it keeps her in her place." Alyssa froze, her shirt halfway over her head. Pep rally. The word pulsed like an alarm. She forced herself to move slowly. As if she hadn't heard, her heart thumped against her ribs. She left the locker room quietly, but the voices trailed behind her like smoke. She couldn't wash off. Out in the parking lot, the evening air pressed cool against her skin. She gripped her duffel tighter, the weight of it grounding her. Somewhere deep inside, a voice began to steady. Not her father's, not her coach's, not even Madison's. Her own. "They think humiliation is the only language I understand," she whispered to herself. But they're wrong. The floodlights above the lot buzzed, casting sharp shadows across the asphalt. In that moment, Alyssa wasn't just a girl with uneven curls and a bruised pride. She was someone cataloging every slight, every whisper, every plan. She knew enough now to stop reacting like prey. Her chest rose and fell, her fists unclenched. She had been taught to read tides, to run in storms, to pinch rope between her feet and climb even when her arms trembled. High school hallways were no different. The pep rally loomed, and now she knew so did a plan. Alyssa's steps slowed as she reached her car. Through the open gym window, she heard Madison's voice, low but clear. This time she won't walk off stage smiling. Alyssa drove home with Madison's sentence rattling like a loose bolt in the chassis. This time she won't walk off stage smiling. The streetlights smeared across the windshield, then broke into beads on the hood. By the time she turned onto their block, her breath had settled into the count Marcus taught her. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. But the dread still pressed like a thumb to her sternum. Marcus had the porch light on again, the house looking like a ship that never stopped scanning for lost boats. He was already waiting in the doorway when she climbed the steps, shoulders set but eyes soft. "How bad?" he asked, moving aside so she could pass. "Bad enough that they're planning the encore," Alyssa said, dropping her bag by the stairs. "Pep rally. They want to make it a show." He nodded once, something in his jaw tightening to a new angle. "I asked for help." Before she could ask from whom, car tires whispered against curb outside. Headlights cut across the living room, and then went dark. The front door swung, and Evelyn May Carter stepped in like she had been summoned by weather. Ellen brought the outdoors with her. Cool night air and a faint scent of pine from the old buttons on her denim jacket. Her hair was a silver halo, cropped close and soft as steel wool, and her posture carried the memory of miles walked on hot pavement. She held a worn cardboard box with handwriting up the side. "Keep not for tossing." Lord, I hate that I know the look on your face, she said, setting the box on the coffee table and opening her arms. Alyssa fell into them like a door finally swinging on its hinge. Evelyn didn't coo. She didn't say it's fine. She cupped Alyssa's jaw, tipped her chin just enough to see the uneven line. Her eyes sharpened, not with pity but with recognition. They tried to take your crown, she said, thumb resting gentle near a ragged curl, but they didn't touch your spine. Can you breathe? Alyssa nodded. Mostly. Her voice wobbled on the wire. Then we're ahead, Evelyn replied, and only then did she hug her fully, holding on until Alyssa's ribs loosened into the shape of being held. Marcus brushed a hand across his mother's shoulder, gratitude and apology crossing his face in one look. Thanks for coming. You texted Lighthouse, Evelyn said. I keep the lamp trimmed. She turned to the box and flipped back the lid. Inside lay a patchwork of decades, a faded church fan printed with a dove and a local funeral home's phone number, a rolled poster with the word vote in thick block letters, plastic baggie holding a small metal pin shaped like a bridge, a yellowed newspaper clipping, a spiral notebook with pages dog-eared to nubs. Alyssa stared. What is all this? Maps, Evelyn said, of the old roads. You don't need to walk them the same way, but it helps to know where they run. She lifted the newspaper clipping first, careful not to tear the brittle edge. The headline read, Harmon High revises cheer presentation policy for uniformity. The date beneath, September 9th. A black and white photo showed a line of white girls in pleated skirts, smiles pasted. The caption named the PTA committee chair who spearheaded the change, Dorothy Vale. Alyssa's breath hitched. Vale, she repeated. Madison's last name. Ellen nodded. I figured. She tapped the article gently. Your daddy was 3 when this came out. I was 17. We wore our hair the way God grew it, and suddenly our edges were political. I had a friend, Laverne, who made the squad on talent. They benched her the first game because her puff cast a shadow on the girl behind her. They said it with a smile. This paper called it community standards. We called it what it was. Alyssa sank onto the couch, eyes locked on the photograph as if it might give up a secret. Same school, same rule, different decade. Patterns love old houses, Evelyn said. They settle into the walls and call it charm. Marcus perched on the arm of a chair, hands tented. Mom marched in Birmingham and Nashville, he said. And his voice shifted with a familiar reverence. Sat in at counters that pretended not to see her. I marched because I was tired of buying dresses. I could try on at home, but not in the store, Evelyn said. I sat because the coffee tasted better when I drank it with dignity. She smiled, quick and flinty. Also because I had good shoes. Alyssa tried to smile and found she could manage a little. What did you do at 17 when they called your hair a problem? I learned the difference between their mirror and mine, Evelyn said. Then I found people who could stand beside me while I made them look. She reached into the box again and lifted the small pin shaped like a bridge. We crossed one of these in Selma. They beat our bodies and charged us with breaking peace. We learned how to carry bruises without letting them write our names. She pressed the pin into Alyssa's palm. Your head is sore today. Your name is not. Alyssa closed her fingers around the cool metal. It felt heavier than it looked. They want to humiliate me at the pep rally, she said. They said it out loud. It won't be scissors this time. It'll be something public. Evelyn did not flinch. Then you decide what kind of public you're going to be. She turned to Marcus. She got a paper trail, screenshots of a group chat, photos of the locker vandalism, video of the dead camera bracket, Marcus said. We filed an incident report. The VP tried to call it girls being girls. Evelyn's laugh was low and without mirth. When they take your teeth, they call it a smile. She picked up the spiral notebook from the box and flipped to a page scribbled with names and dates. This is a list of who looked away and who watched on my worst days. Not to hold grudges, to know the lay of the land. Some folks are furniture. Some are doors. Some are alarms. Alyssa leaned forward. I don't have a map of this place yet. You're making one, Evelyn said. Jenna's one hinge. She swung late, but she swung. Coach, that woman's a locked drawer. She looks like storage, but she hides decisions. Alyssa's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Jenna, I'm sorry for earlier. I sent a chat to you and to myself at my mom's email. If I disappear, there's a copy. Then a second text. My aunt is nervous. Something about donors coming to the pep rally. PTA bigwigs. Marcus lifted an eyebrow. Donors? Evelyn's eyes warmed the way radar warms when it finds a returning signal. That means cameras. Official ones. A good light is a stubborn witness. Then they won't try anything too obvious, Alyssa said. Or they'll try something they can frame as joke. Ellen reached for the box again and pulled out a square of yellow fabric. A head wrap soft from washings, hand-stitched at the edge. I wore this on days they wanted me small, she said. Not to hide, to remind myself my head was mine. She set it in Alyssa's lap. Your hair is short now, wrap it if you want. Or don't. But if you do, make it a choice, not a reaction. Alyssa's throat tightened. If I wear it, they'll say I'm making a statement. You are, Evelyn replied. The statement says I can dress my wound and still walk in my power. Let them hear it. I don't want to turn the pep rally into a fight, Alyssa said. It already is one, Evelyn said, just not with fists. Her gaze softened, the steel never leaving. We're not here to swing, we're here to stand. She glanced at Marcus, and to plan for when the floor tilts. Marcus nodded and pulled a legal pad from the kitchen drawer, the page new and stark. We set objectives, he said, almost to himself. 1. Alyssa performs at her best regardless of sabotage. 2. We make it difficult to reframe harm as humor. 3. We position witnesses. Who? Alyssa asked. Ellen tapped the newspaper clipping. I still play spades with 2 women who hated this article 40 years ago, and sit on the district's equity advisory. They've been waiting for a call that isn't just noise. I'll invite them to the pep rally under the guise of alumni night. They'll bring eyes that can tell a stain from a spill. She looked at Marcus. You sit in the 3rd row, center aisle. That's where the TV camera likes to pan for mood shots. If anything looks wrong, you don't stand up. You stand out. Slow. Marcus's mouth quirked. Slow is smooth, he said. Smooth is fast, Evelyn finished. Yes. They think they invented composure. She turned to Alyssa. You turn your body into proof. Their tricks will read like static next to your form. Alyssa breathed. Steady. What if they mess with my uniform? Or my music? Or the mat? Then they tell on themselves in front of donors, Evelyn said. And you keep moving. You adjust without telling your face. You make the audience believe they meant to showcase you. Alyssa traced the edge of the head wrap with her thumb. It feels like cheating to be this strategic. It's called surviving with style, Evelyn said. And anyway, they've been strategic since the ink dried on that clipping. She pulled another paper from the box. This one a photocopy of a policy draft with red pen notes. At the top, appearance guidance, cheer and dance. In the margin, in neat cursive, L. Whitmore. Evelyn's tongue clicked softly. This one's newer. A parent gave it to me 3 years ago. It never went public. But look at the language. She pointed to phrases, neat, tame, professional. These words get used like Windex. They pretend to clean, but they erase. Is that your coach's handwriting? Alyssa stared. She could see it. The same neat, looping script from the locker notice. The page suddenly felt hot. She'd deny it, she said. That's what denials are for, Evelyn answered. They make the truth patient. Marcus exhaled, a low whistle. Mom, how do you keep everything? Same way you kept your old team photo, she said, mouth turning. I like my own archive. Alyssa looked from the photocopy to the clipping, to the head wrap, to the pin in her palm. The room felt crowded with witnesses who would not speak unless she called them by name. I don't want to be just a case study, she said. I still want to dance. I still want to fly. Then fly, baby, Evelyn said. Fly right over them. But fly with your eyes open. She tucked a stray coil behind Alyssa's ear that refused to tuck, then left it alone when it sprung back. You're not alone in that air. You got hands under you. When they shake, you lock. That's choreography and life. Alyssa leaned back, the couch swallowing some portion of her weight. I thought I needed to be invisible to survive. That if I moved quietly enough, they'd forget I'd bother them. They don't forget, Evelyn said. Your existence interrupts their story. That's not your flaw. That's your fact. Her phone pulsed again. Jenna, I think Madison's mom is meeting with Coach tonight. They're in the office now. If you want to see the side window latch sticks, you can hear through it. A second later, I know that's sneaky. I'm trying to be brave. Marcus glanced at the screen, then at Evelyn. We don't trespass, he said, instinctive. Evelyn lifted a brow. We don't, but we do witness. If someone opens a window, we listen. Alyssa stood, blood humming now, not with fear, but with direction. She slipped the bridge pin onto the inside seam of her hoodie, hidden, close. She folded the head wrap and tucked it into her bag. Her body felt different with these small additions, as if she'd strapped on a quiet armor no metal detector could find. "Tomorrow is the pep rally," she said. "They want me humiliated. I'm gonna give them performance." Ellen smiled, the kind that shows a line of history at the corners of the mouth. "And we'll give them audience." She reached for Alyssa's hands and held them warm between her own. "One more thing," she said, voice lowering, the air in the room thickening with the weight of what she was about to pass down. "When you hear laughter that isn't for you, swallow only enough of it to keep your throat clear. Spit the rest back into your steps. And remember," she searched Alyssa's face the way one searches a map before a dangerous turn. "Their cruelty isn't just childish. It's learned from the world around them." Evelyn's warning hung in the living room like incense, present even after the candles went dark. Alyssa tucked the head wrap into her bag and the bridge pin against her seam, and the house settled into a quiet that wasn't empty. Marcus rinsed 2 mugs at the sink, hands moving with the same deliberate care he used to coil rope. "Up before dawn," he said without turning. "We start small and we start right." "Training?" Alyssa asked, though she already knew. "Not punishment," he said. "Practice." Before the first light bled into the sky, Alyssa met him in the driveway, air cold enough to pinch her lungs awake. The neighborhood was a line drawing at this hour. Roof lines, bare branches, a street lamp swaying almost imperceptibly. Marcus handed her a knit cap. 2 warm-up laps, he said. Then the hill. They ran without music. Gravel crunched under their shoes. Alyssa's breath fogged, uneven at first, then finding cadence. At the base of the hill, Marcus stopped and tapped his fingers against his thigh, counting the space between breaths. "We build 3 kinds of stamina," he said. "Body, brain, and dignity. All 3 get tired. All 3 can be trained." Alyssa smiled despite the chill. "I didn't know dignity got winded." "It does when someone keeps punching it with a smile," he answered. "Ready?" She nodded and hit the incline. The hill asked questions her ego didn't want to answer. "How much do you have? How much will you give? Who are you when it hurts?" Her calves flared. She shortened her stride like he taught her years ago. When she reached the mailbox at the top, she tagged it, turned and jogged back down. Marcus met her with a low nod. Approval without fanfare. "Again," he said. Slow as smooth. On the 3rd climb, her chest burned. She wanted to quit, an honest, hungry want. "You can walk," Marcus said, trotting beside her. "Walk with purpose or run with purpose. That's the only rule." She kept running. Back in the garage, the rope hung from the ceiling beam, like a sentence waiting for its verb. The whiteboard still carried old goals in faded marker. Marcus drew a line beneath them, and wrote, "Pep rally, choose your rhythm." He tossed her the chalk bag. "Grip," he said. "Pinch the rope between your shoes. Knees, feet, stand. Breathe on the corners." She wiped her hands, reached, and pulled. 10 inches, 12, then a foot. Her arms trembled, embarrassing in the cold morning privacy. "Again," he said. "You don't have to get high today. You have to get honest." He coached in fragments. "Hips under you, tiny resets. Look where you're going, not where you've been." Between pulls, he added the other work. Push-ups in tight sets of 5, each rep a small promise. A 2-minute plank where he rested a book between her shoulder blades, so she felt every sag. Box breathing with a metronome click from his phone. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold, an invisible square she could carry into any room. When she collapsed onto the mat, he didn't offer pity. He offered water. "Hard is training," he said. "Cruelty is a tactic. Don't confuse them." She wiped her mouth with her sleeve. "They're planning something at the pep rally," she said between breaths. Jenna heard it, and Evelyn thinks donors will be there. Lots of eyes. "Good," Marcus said. "Eyes mean witnesses. But we don't perform for them. We perform for ourselves." He crouched so their eyes were level. "You're going to feel the gravity of that room tug on you, like a current. You already know what to do and keep yours intact, and you'll come home with more than you left with, no matter how they write the scoreboard." She swallowed. "What if they take the mic? The music? The mat?" "Then you dance anyway," he said. "Hum if you have to. Count in your head. Let your feet be the metronome. Adjust your landing if the mat shifts. You already trained for uneven ground." They moved to mental drills at the kitchen table over oatmeal. Marcus slid a legal pad toward her. "Words under pressure," he said. We write them now so you don't have to find them later. He wrote 3 prompts. What happened, what I need, what I will not accept. Short sentences, he said. Steady voice. No apologies hidden inside. Alyssa wrote, my locker was vandalized with a racist message. I need the school to document and address it. On record. I will not accept girls being girls as an answer. Seeing it on the page steadied something inside her. She practiced reading it aloud without her voice asking permission to exist. They built rituals. Backup hair ties in her bag and in the car. A copy of the equity policy Evelyn had given them, highlighted. A small kit. A roll of athletic tape. Bobby pins. Spare laces. 2 is 1. 1 is none. Redundancy is not paranoia, Marcus said. It's respect for your future self. When she left for school, the sun still low, he caught her at the door. 2 more drills, he said. Quick. She braced. He didn't hand her a weight. He handed her a mirror from the hall. Look, he said. Say your name and the thing you're proudest of this week. She felt silly, but she did it. Alyssa Carter, she said. I didn't hide. Good, he said. Second drill. He glanced past her to the footlocker in the hall, still open from the night before. He lifted the old team photo he'd kept after a wall cropped him out, and set it beside her own tryout photo. The squad had cropped tight. Name the crop, he said. Out loud. They make the frame small when the subject makes them nervous, she said. Surprising herself with how quickly the words came, he smiled. A quiet curve. Then bring your own frame. They made that their theme without saying it twice. The next mornings fell into rhythm. Hill, rope, breath, words. Alyssa's body remembered faster than she expected. The first day she held a plank for 90 seconds, and shook like wind through a thin door. By the 4th day she hit 2 minutes with her jaw relaxed. On the 5th she climbed 2 feet higher on the rope, and laughed when she came down, not giddy, but relieved to meet a version of herself. She thought the scissors had cut away. Between sets, Marcus taught micro-rituals that felt almost childish, and turned out to be anchors. Pick 4 objects in a room when you walk in, he said. Windows, clock, exit, nearest adult with authority. If something breaks bad, you already know the exits. If something breaks good, you know where to shine the light. He practiced responses with her the way he once rehearsed radio checks. They say it's not a big deal, and you say it's a violation. They say, why make it about race? And you say, it already is. I'm making it about accountability. They say, can't you take a joke? And you say, I'm not here to be your punchline. He kept the tone dry, almost boring. Boredom is your friend, he told her. Calm reads as truth on camera. On the 3rd morning, as dawn stained the sky pale coral, he startled her with a confession that bent the air. They sat on the curb, warm-up jog done, and he rubbed his thumb over the ridges of his water bottle cap. I used to get panic attacks after missions, he said, not looking at her. Big man, tough job. Couldn't get air at the grocery store. Your grandma found me on the kitchen floor once, breathing like a fish out of water. Alyssa sat up straighter. It was a truth she hadn't expected. A new compass point. What did you do? Counted corners, he said. Box breathing saved me when the bravado didn't. Once a guy on my team put his hand on my back and said, feel your ribs, Carter. They're still there. He was white. I was embarrassed that it helped. It helped anyway. He looked at her now. If I can say that out loud, you can say this hurt me without apologizing for the volume. She looked at him like he'd cracked something open in a wall and let light in. Okay, she said. Okay. They added something quieter to the regimen. A minute each morning of standing in her room, eyes closed, picturing herself walking into the gym with her head up. She imagined the squeak of shoes, the hum of the crowd, the burn of stage lights on her cheeks. She rehearsed seeing herself whole before other people tried to edit her. At school, the static around her didn't vanish. It sharpened. A teacher still called her hair distracting under the pretense of guidance. A custodian offered a quick pitying glance, and kept sweeping. Madison's orbit hummed louder, rehearsed laughter, a new inside joke every day. But the training worked like noise-canceling headphones. It didn't eliminate the sound, it took the edge off. Alyssa caught herself standing taller at her locker, her spine remembering what upright felt like. Eleanor dropped by one evening, with a bag of oranges, and a legal pad scrawled with names. Alumni are in, she said. 2 sit on either side of the donors. One has a granddaughter on basketball. They'll clap with perfect politeness while watching like hawks. She kissed Alyssa's forehead, then to Marcus added, "And don't forget to eat a vegetable that isn't adrenaline." On the final dawn before the pep rally, Marcus clicked off the porch light and met Alyssa at the bottom of the steps with a small folded index card. "Last drill," he said. "You can tuck it inside your shoe if you want." On it, in his block print, 3 lines. "I will not negotiate my worth. I will not let an audience decide my next move. I will move with intention, not apology." She slid the card into her sock, the corner against her ankle a tiny comforting irritant. "Feels like a secret," she said. "It's a promise," he corrected. "Secrets rot. Promises root." They ran the hill one more time, and at the top, Marcus didn't say anything. He just stood beside her as the sun tipped over the roofs and warmed the frost off a mailbox flag. Silence, as a muscle. She flexed it. Back home, while stretching in the garage, her phone buzzed. A new email, from Coach Whitmore. "Reminder, uniform checks today, at lunch. Presentation matters. Do not deviate from approved styles." Attached was a PDF with the same neat cursive in the margins she'd seen on the locker notice. Alyssa felt the clutch in her gut and breathed through it. "Lateral. Save breath." She wrote back, "I will arrive on time with my uniform clean and intact." She did not engage the bait. At lunch, Coach held a clipboard like a measuring stick. "Skirts ironed, bows center," she said, scanning the line. When she reached Alyssa, her eyes paused on the short curls and the head wrap folded in Alyssa's bag. "You will not wear that," she said, chin flicking at the fabric. "It's not part of the uniform," Alyssa said evenly. "I brought it in case the gym is cold while we wait." A truth and a test. Coach held her gaze a hair too long, then marked something on the clipboard and moved on. Madison smirked as if she'd won a bet, only she knew about. After school, before practice, Marcus stood at the kitchen counter, laying out 2 apples, a handful of almonds, and a bottle of water like rations. "Tomorrow is not a verdict," he said. "It's a rep. You do the rep, and you come home." Alyssa looked at his hands. Hands that had built shelves and fixed sinks, and held her bike seat steady, the first time she let go. Hands that now arranged small things with the precision of someone preparing to meet chaos without rushing. "I'm scared," she said, and the words felt clean coming out. "Good," he said. "Fear tells the truth. Courage chooses it anyway." She nodded and picked up the apple. After a bite, she asked, "What if they bench me after? What if they make it impossible?" "Then you choose a different fight," he said gently, "or you build a new room. Either way, you don't leave because they dimmed the lights. You leave because you flipped your own switch." That night, Alyssa stood in the doorway of her room, with the head wrap in her hands. She tied it once, twice, adjusting until it felt like a crown, not a bandage. She practiced taking it on and off, not to please anyone but to make sure it obeyed her. In the mirror, her uneven curls framed her face when the fabric came off. She looked like herself, altered and intact. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A new message from an unknown number slid across the screen. "Bench spots decided. Don't bother stretching tomorrow." A second message arrived a heartbeat later from Jenna. "They're lying. I overheard Coach wanted you as center flyer," until someone called her from the committee. Then a third text from a different unknown. "Standards are standards. Don't make a scene." Alyssa stared at the 3 threads. Her pulse spiked, then steadied. She walked to the whiteboard in the garage. And under pep rally, "Choose your rhythm," she added. In her own handwriting, "I decide the scene." She set the cap back on the marker and stepped away. In the quiet of the house, with Evelyn's warning woven into her spine and Marcus's drills in her muscles, she made a decision that landed in her chest like a key turning in a lock. "I'm not quitting," she said to the empty room. To the rope in the garage, to the footlocker in the hall, to the girl in the mirror who had survived scissors and 1,000 small cuts. "No matter how hostile it gets, I'm not giving them the satisfaction. I'm staying." The words didn't echo. They rooted. And as her screen lit once more with a flurry of messages she refused to open, Alyssa's jaw set in a line the team had never seen before. By morning, the index card in Alyssa's sock felt like a tiny square of courage. She pressed her heel down and could almost hear Marcus's handwriting. 3 lines, 3 anchors, steadying her gait as she walked onto campus. The sky was the flat white of a blank page, the kind a school likes to write on. She breathed on the corners and moved. Her locker door stuck for a half second, the way it always did when humidity swelled the metal. When it finally gave, an envelope slid out and skated across the tile, landing by her shoe. No name on the front. Inside, a strip of paper, laser cut clean, read, "Uniforms are earned, not handed out for statements." At the bottom, a smiley face drawn too carefully to be casual. She took a photo, bagged the note, and put it with the others. Lateral saves breath. She refused to feed panic. Second period, she unzipped her backpack for a pencil and found a folded square tucked inside her binder. "Some hair is professional. Yours isn't." The words were typed in a serif font she recognized from school handouts, the same template coach used for permission slips. The paper smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, like it had rested where administrators moved their coffee mugs. Another photo. Another bag. By mid-morning, the whispers held weight. "Standards," someone breathed as she passed. "Attention-seeking," another said with a smile designed to be deniable. A boy leaning against the trophy case mouthed a word she had heard weaponized since second grade without letting it touch his lips. He held up his hands after, palms out, a parody of innocence. "Kidding," he said, "not kidding at all." In English, Mrs. Langston launched into a lesson about satire. "Sometimes sharp humor," she said, "is how a society corrects itself." Her eyes drifted over Alyssa, and away like an airplane that doesn't land where it's needed. When a student suggested satire can be mean, the teacher chuckled. "Only if you're the target and you forget to laugh," she said. Alyssa wrote the sentence down and underlined it twice, not because she agreed, but because it was part of the script she was now mapping. The real turn came in chemistry. Mr. Harlan, trim beard, school tie, PTA treasurer badge clipped to his belt, stood at the front with a carton of plastic goggles and a grin that always looked like it knew who paid for the new lab stools. "Group work," he announced. "Pick a partner who fits, ladies and gents. We want clean data." The room erupted into motion. Chairs scraping, eyes scanning for their safety net. Alyssa slid her hand up, scanning for Jenna. But Madison moved faster, hooking elbows with Kelsey, bright and practiced. Briar snapped her fingers at another girl, a subtle claim. Within 30 seconds the room was sorted, and Alyssa, still half standing, found herself without a chair pulled out in invitation. Mr. Harlan let the lull bloom a beat too long before noticing. "Miss Carter, no partner?" His tone held polite surprise, the kind that performs concern without paying it. "I can work solo," Alyssa said evenly. "You can average my data in." He tilted his head. "We want a good fit. Chemistry is a team sport, like cheer, right?" He gestured toward Madison and Briar and smiled. "There we are. Slide in with them. Learn the ropes." Madison's expression flickered, an annoyance disguised as a smile. "Of course," she said. "Sugar on glass. We love team spirit." She pushed a stool back with her foot, hard enough that it scraped Alyssa's shin when she sat. "Careful," she added, not looking up. Kelsey laughed into her sleeve. As they began the reaction, vinegar and baking soda, freshman-level theatrics, designed to teach gas laws. Mr. Harlan drifted past, hands in pockets, humming a school fight song under his breath. "Now optics," he said casually, glancing at the bubbling flask. "Optics matter. A lab that looks tidy makes the data trustworthy." He didn't look at Madison's loose hair or Kelsey's chipped nail polish. His eyes rested on Alyssa's curls, and then the head wrap folded in her bag. "We don't get precious about style. We get focused on results. You understand?" "Results are why I'm here," Alyssa said. She kept her voice level. She did not offer him the edge he wanted to use. He nodded, pleased with his own measured tone. "We're a community. We don't want distractions. When everything looks the same, nothing takes the eye away." "Some of us can't look the same," Alyssa said, still not looking up from her measurement. She poured, steady. The foam rose right to the rim and settled like a taut breath. Across the bench, Madison murmured, "Bless your heart," and wrote numbers she hadn't measured into her lab sheet. Kelsey giggled at nothing. Briar whispered, "Donors tomorrow," like a password. Mr. Harlan clapped once. "Beautiful," he said, eyes on Madison's neatly copied equation. "That's the spirit. Our school's had standards since my mom ran this hallway. Tradition keeps us consistent." Alyssa felt the floor tilt a degree. She looked up. "Your mom? Dorothy Harlan Vale before she married my dad," he said easily. She chaired spirit back when spirit meant something. He winked. The family tree snapped into focus. Briar's father, Madison's mother's friend, A line running from that 1968 clipping straight through today. The bell released the room. But the fog didn't lift. Alyssa had a headache by lunch. A tight band wrapping from one temple to the other. She carried her tray through the cafeteria and chose a corner. Again, a few girls glanced over, and then one boy circled like maybe he would sit. Then Madison waved him over, and he smiled an apology he didn't mean. Alyssa took 3 bites of a sandwich that tasted like dust, and wrapped the rest back up. The room hummed on without her. On her way out, she cut through the math wing, and heard 2 teachers talking in the copy room, the door propped with a stapler. If her hair was neat, this wouldn't be an issue, one voice said. It's about the uniform, not race. Parents are watching, another replied. We can't have a scene with donors in the building. Laura's under pressure. Aunt Laura, Coach Whitmore. She'll handle it. Girls like that burn bright and burn out. The stapler thudded as the door swung. Alyssa pressed herself flat against the cold cinder block and waited for their heels to click away. She forced a breath out between her teeth, tasted toner in the air. Every corridor had a version of the same conversation. 1,000 small engines running an old machine. By last period, she felt hollow. She asked for a hall pass and stood alone in a bathroom stall, hands on her knees, counting grout lines like tally marks. The room echoed with muted chatter from girls at the mirror reapplying lip gloss. One voice drifted up. She brings it on herself. Another, I heard she's not even from this district. She just snuck in for the team. A third, my mom says the committee will fix it. A toilet flushed. Water ran. Laughter followed them out. Alyssa pressed the index card harder, against her ankle, as if the words could seep through skin. When she finally stepped out, the bathroom was empty. She washed her hands and let cold water sit in her palms for 3 beats. It didn't put out the fire, it kept her edges from curling. Practice brought its own choreography of exclusion. Coach held a clipboard like a gavel and said, Final formation checks. Names were called. Positions assigned. Madison, center flyer. Breyer left. Kelsey right. Alyssa backline. Second from the end. Backline? Alyssa said. Her tone wasn't loud. It was honest. Coach's eyes slid over the page. We need symmetry. Once presentation stabilizes, we can review rotations. Madison smirked. Backline's still the team, she said. Every role matters. Breyer added, especially quiet ones. Alyssa stretched in place, focused on breath, on the ceiling's T-bars, on the way the light stuttered when the HVAC kicked. Jenna hovered at the doorway, unsure. Alyssa gave the smallest shake of her head later. The routine ran, and Alyssa hit her counts so precisely it hurt. Coach didn't look. After school, the halls drained, the noise rolled off campus, and there was a brief, beautiful minute when everything sounded like pencils being put away and lockers eased shut. Alyssa stopped at the water fountain, took a long drink, and stood, letting the cool metal button imprint her thumb. Her phone buzzed, then again, then kept buzzing like a trapped insect. She pulled it out. A notification banner. Harmon Hype tagged you in a post. The account had 3,000 followers. Students, alumni, parents. A spirit page, sanctioned by the PTA. The thumbnail showed her face mid-jump, frozen, hair uneven, mouth open in a look of fierce concentration. She tapped. The video opened with a slow zoom of her pep rally jump. At the apex, someone had edited in the sound of shears snipping, crisp and close to the microphone. The cut looped with perfect timing, turning her hang time into repeated cuts. Each repetition triggered a chorus of canned laugh tracks. Then a match cut to a long crew trimming hedges at the football field. Then back to Alyssa. Then to a mop sloshing in a bucket. Then to a tumbleweed rolling across a desert. Captions flashed. New spirit accessory. Keep it neat. Stand. A watermark glowed faintly in the corner for the first 2 seconds. Harmon AV Club before it flickered away under a glitch, as if someone had remembered to hide their tracks but not fast enough. Within a minute, the view count ticked up by the hundreds. Comments poured like pebbles dumped down a pipe. Alm's dead. I can't stop watching. It's a joke. Relax. A string of scissor emojis stacked into a mocking fringe. One handle popped out from the likes. No. Adi Khan or sopping. A teacher account heart glowing red. Another, Coach Laura W., had viewed it. The app reported, 2 minutes ago. No response. No public objection. Just silence. Jenna texted. Frantic bubbles popping in. I didn't do this. I'm trying to get it taken down. It's on the Spirit page because PTA approved their posts. The AV club runs it. I'm so sorry. Alyssa stared at the watermark, at the bright gym lights framing her jump, at the edits that turned her body into a punchline. Her stomach dropped, then hovered, then stopped falling. She watched it again, this time slower. The camera angle wasn't from a student phone in the bleachers. It was from above, high and dead center. Not a spectator view. A feed. A key-only angle. Her breath thinned, then steadied. The index card warmed against her skin. Outside, a car horn honked. Somewhere, a door slammed. In the long window of the trophy case, her reflection looked back, smaller than the plaques, smaller than the banners, but not gone. Her screen vibrated with a new DM, from a private account. Tomorrow will be worse. She lifted her eyes from the phone, and saw through the narrow pane of the gym door. Coach and Madison standing with a woman in a blazer. Alyssa didn't recognize, smiling, pointing at the court, as if nothing had happened, and everything was going to plan. The video's view count hit 5,000. It wasn't just that the school was laughing. Someone with access had handed them the camera. The cruel video still burned on every student's phone by the time the morning bell rang. Alyssa felt the weight of eyes before she even reached her locker. Gazes sharp, heavy, unblinking. She heard the laughter before the screen doors closed. Before sneakers squeaked across the tile. Her name wasn't said out loud. It didn't need to be. The scissor emojis carried enough echo. She felt her pulse sprint. Her throat threatened to close. Her hand brushed the inside of her sock, fingertips grazing the folded index card Marcus had written. She whispered the first line to herself. I will not negotiate my worth. The words settled like ballast. Her chest still hurt, but she could breathe again. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Slow was smooth. At her locker, another note waited. This one wasn't typed or careful. Marker on notebook paper, letters jagged. Spirit needs smiles, not afros. She stared at it long enough to take in the loops of ink, then folded it, slipped it into her folder, and closed the door. She didn't rip it, didn't crumple it. She archived it. Evidence, not prophecy. Second period, 2 boys behind her whispered, scissors cutting air with their fingers. One made the sound snip snip close to her ear. The teacher didn't notice, or pretended not to. Alyssa kept her hands still on the desk. She pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth until the taste of metal passed. In her head she replayed the hill climbs, lungs searing, calves burning. Marcus's steady voice telling her walk with purpose, or run with purpose. But don't stop moving. She let the whispers drift past her like crosswind. At lunch, Jenna slid into the seat across from her, tray untouched. The video, she started, but Alyssa cut in softly. I know, it's everywhere. She reached for her apple, took a deliberate bite. I'm not reacting. That's what they want. Jenna's eyes flicked toward Madison's table, where the squad sat clustered, laughter bubbling too loud. They're planning something else, she whispered. I don't know what, but they keep saying tomorrow will be the end of your spotlight. Alyssa set the apple down. Her hand was steady, even though her stomach wasn't. Then we make tomorrow about my performance, not theirs. Jenna hesitated. Aren't you scared? Yes, Alyssa said plainly. But fear isn't the same as surrender. That night, the garage became her sanctuary. The rope hung waiting, and the whiteboard still bore Marcus's scrawled note. Pep rally. Choose your rhythm. She tied her sneakers tight, dusted her palms, and climbed until her arms shook. Again, Marcus said when she slid down. She pushed back up, locking the rope between her feet. Knees, pinch, stand. Knees, pinch, stand. Her arms trembled, her lungs burned. But at the ceiling beam she touched the wood and let herself grin for the first time in days. See? Marcus said. Gravity's only a bully until you make it a partner. They moved through drills, push-ups, planks, box breathing. Every rep chipped away at the static left by the video. Alyssa's body, sore and tired, felt more like her own than the image edited online. She was building armor no one could crop or caption. But Marcus pushed further. Cheer isn't just endurance, he said. It's precision under pressure. They'll want you to crack. You need to perform with your mind steadier than your heartbeat. He pulled out an old Navy metronome, the kind used for drills. Counts. Less. Lock into them until they're yours, no matter the noise. She practiced motions with the click ticking in the background. Jumps, spins, arm placements. At first the sound made her rush. her body wanting to get ahead. But she slowed, breathed with the corners, and found the rhythm. She moved smooth. Smooth became fast. At school the next day, the squad gathered for practice. The gym felt charged, the way the ocean feels before a storm. Madison's smile was sugar and salt. "Backline again," coach announced. "Presentation matters." Alyssa didn't argue. She stepped into her place, spine tall, chin up. Inside she repeated her rules. "I will not negotiate my worth. I will not let an audience decide my next move. I will move with intention, not apology." The squad ran through routines. When it came time for stunts, Madison sneered. "Alyssa, base, don't drop me." Alyssa crouched, locked her arms, and lifted steady. Madison wobbled, not because of Alyssa, but because she was used to her bases bending. Alyssa's grip didn't falter. The pyramid held like steel. Madison's smile strained, and for once her perfection cracked. "Reset," coach barked. Again. They ran it 3 more times. Each time, Alyssa's base didn't waver. The other bases began to falter instead. Their arms tired. Alyssa, fueled by hill runs and rope climbs, held steady. By the 3rd round, even Kelsey's arms shook, and Madison hissed down at her. Alyssa said nothing, only breathed, only counted the corners. The whispers in the squad grew quieter. Small glances traded, uncertainty creeping in where cruelty used to live. But Alyssa wasn't content to be just steady. She wanted flight. During water break, she stepped toward coach. "Let me try the tuck again," she said. Coach raised an eyebrow. "Backline isn't flyer." "Then let me practice while they rest," Alyssa replied, voice calm. "I'll take the mat alone." The gym hushed, curious. Madison crossed her arms, smirk tugging her lips. "This should be good." Alyssa inhaled, deep and steady. She heard Marcus's voice. "You've already run through storms. You've already climbed ropes that shook. The floor is steady. Trust it." She launched. Her body tucked tight, rotation sharp. The landing came clean, toes pointed, knees soft, arms up. No wobble, no apology. The sound of her shoes on the mat echoed in the silence. The squad froze. Madison's smirk slipped. Kelsey blinked. Breyer's mouth fell open. Even coach's clipboard dipped an inch. Jenna, watching from the doorway, gripped her phone tight, recording. The screen caught not just the stunt, but the expressions rippling through the squad. Shock, disbelief, cracks in the carefully constructed order. Alyssa lifted her chin, breath calm, heart steady. She didn't smile wide. She didn't gloat. She simply stood tall, her body saying what her mouth didn't need to. "I belong here, no matter how much you want me gone." The silence stretched until Madison muttered, "Too loud to be casual." "Lucky landing." "No," coach said quietly, her eyes still on Alyssa. "That was controlled." And in that moment, the hierarchy shifted by a fraction. The first stone loosened in a wall that had stood too long. Alyssa turned back toward the squad, spine straight, as Madison's eyes narrowed to slits. The captain's smile returned, but this time it carried something sharper than mockery. It carried intent, and Alyssa knew the real sabotage was coming. The pep rally day dawned with a kind of brittle brightness, the air sharp as glass. Alyssa felt it the second she stepped out onto the porch with her gym bag slung over her shoulder. The world had been waiting for this moment. Every sound carried a little too far. The bark of a dog, the crunch of gravel under her sneakers, the way the school bus brakes sighed at the corner like a long warning. Marcus stood at the driveway with his arms crossed, the porch light still humming though the sun was high. "Today's just a rep," he said, handing her the folded index card she now kept in her sock. "You know your rhythm. Don't let theirs touch it." "I know," Alyssa said, steadying her voice. She tucked the card against her ankle, the edges biting into her skin, just enough to remind her it was there. She wasn't going in blind. She had trained for this body, mind, and dignity. The school gym smelled of popcorn and floor polish. Bleachers groaning under the weight of hundreds of students. Posters fluttered from the rafters. The letters "Go Eagles" stenciled in bold blue. The noise was alive, a living thing that surged and rolled as the band struck up its first number. Donors and PTA members sat clustered near the front, their smiles polished, eyes sharp. The cheer squad gathered in the locker room. A pocket of hush before the storm. Madison's voice sliced through the air, syrupy sweet. "Uniform check, girls." She moved down the line, tugging bows, straightening skirts. When she reached Alyssa, she smiled too wide. Don't want any accidents. Alyssa didn't respond, only adjusted her skirt herself. But when she pulled her uniform top over her head, she felt it, a tug where the seam should have been solid. The stitching near her shoulder had been cut, just enough that a hard stunt could rip it open. Subtle, quiet sabotage. Her pulse spiked, but she heard Marcus in her ear. Hard is training. Cruelty is a tactic. She inhaled 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. She tied the spare laces from her bag around her torso beneath the uniform, binding the weak seam tight. Improvised, ugly, but it would hold. When they filed out into the gym, the roar hit like a wave. The crowd clapped in rhythm, feet stomping bleachers. Alyssa kept her head high, the noise washing past her without drowning her. She found Evelyn in the 3rd row, eyes sharp, her silver hair a beacon. Marcus beside her, calm and still, scanning every corner of the gym like a soldier. She steadied. The music hit, bass thumping, horns sharp. The squad leapt into motion. Alyssa moved with precision, every count etched into her muscles. The sabotage came fast. On the second 8 count, Briar's heel accidentally clipped her calf, sharp enough to sting. Alyssa didn't stumble. On the lift, Kelsey released a fraction early, letting Madison's weight tilt toward Alyssa's side. Alyssa locked her arms, held the pyramid steady, teeth gritted. Madison smiled down at the donors as if nothing had happened. Then, on the jump sequence, Alyssa felt the tug, her seam giving under the force. A tear spidered down the fabric, right where the scissors had been. Gasps rippled through the bleachers. Madison's smirk flashed triumph, but Alyssa didn't freeze. She pivoted midair, landed clean, and with one motion, yanked her spare bow from her wrist and tied it across the tear, cinching the fabric snug. A flash of color now sat across her shoulder like a sash, not a flaw but a flare. The crowd murmured. She didn't miss the next count. The squad pressed on, but something had shifted. Alyssa wasn't surviving the routine. She was owning it. Each move hit sharp. Each smile was earned, not plastered. Her training carried her rope, climbs in her legs, planks in her core, breath counts steadying her timing. She flew into a back tuck, rotation perfect, landing solid. The crowd erupted, louder than for anyone else. Madison's face cracked mid-smile, the first fracture showing through the polish. Kelsey's eyes darted. Briar's count faltered. Alyssa picked it up, clapping sharp, rallying the team back to rhythm. She led, not by title but by gravity. When the final pyramid formed, Alyssa was back base, Madison at the top, grinning like a pageant queen. But Alyssa knew the truth. The weight above her was wobbling, fragile. She tightened her stance, steadied the structure. At the peak, Madison lifted her arms, but the cheer that followed wasn't for her. It was for Alyssa. The bleachers thundered, the noise rolling over itself. Students rose to their feet, clapping in time. Donors leaned forward, eyebrows lifted. The chant rose, not Madison's name, not Eagles, but the rhythm of Alyssa's jump, the crowd mimicking her landing with stomps. She stood at the back, breathing steady, uniform torn but tied, sweat stinging her eyes, and realized this was victory. Not perfect, not pretty, but undeniable. Evelyn clapped slow and deliberate from the 3rd row, a rhythm older than the gym, older than the banners. Marcus didn't smile, but his eyes flicked toward her, steady as a lighthouse beam. The squad bowed. Madison's smile shook. Alyssa's did not. As they filed off, whispers hissed through the gym. Did you see her land? Did you see her fix it mid-routine? The chant still echoed in the rafters. Alyssa's chest rose with something that wasn't just relief. It was fire. But as the locker room door shut behind them, Madison leaned close, voice venom under honey. Enjoy your applause, Carter. It won't last. Her words slid into the air like a blade. Alyssa didn't answer. She didn't need to. The roar of the crowd still rattled the walls, and for the first time, the sound wasn't Madison's to claim. The crowd outside was still chanting Alyssa's name, louder, sharper, undeniable, and Madison's narrowed eyes burned with something dangerous. Not just envy, but a promise of war. The roar from the gym still pulsed inside the walls when the locker room door thudded shut. Madison's smile looked painted on with a shaking hand. Enjoy that little moment, she breathed, stepping so close Alyssa could smell the sugar of her hairspray. You won applause. I own the season. Alyssa didn't answer. She pressed 2 fingers to her ankle, feeling the edge of Marcus's index card through her sock like a seam of steel. Outside, the chant thinned to hallway chatter. Inside, the air thickened. Coach Whitmore clapped her hands lightly, clipboard hugged to her chest. "Nice adjustments," she said, voice pitched for donors milling just beyond the door. "We'll debrief later. Smiles for the VIPs, please." Her eyes skimmed past the makeshift bow cinched across Alyssa's torn shoulder, and didn't stop. The message was a familiar one. Survival wasn't to be named. They filed back toward the gym's side corridor, where donors waited with cameras and compliments. A cluster formed around Madison. Parents in linen, a woman in a blazer who introduced herself as Caroline Vale, with a bracelet that flashed like a tiny lighthouse. "My daughter has captained since freshman year," she said to anyone with a hand free. "Legacy matters." The word legacy floated like perfume, expensive and hard to wash off. Alyssa paused in the shadow of the trophy case and watched the choreography Money performed. The AV club advisor, Mr. DeMarco, hovered nearby with a new DSLR slung across his chest, a donor plaque glinting on the wall beside him. "Vale Family Media Fund, enhancing student voice." Caroline's laugh rang out as she patted his arm. "Make sure you got Madison's heel stretch," she said, casual as a purchase order. He nodded too quickly. Jenna slid up beside Alyssa, whispering without moving her lips. "The Harmon Hype account follows Caroline's private profile," she said. "She's in the admin list. I saw it on the AV club computer while I was dropping off a hall pass this morning." Her eyes flicked to the DSLR. "That watermark on your video? It was the mezzanine camera the AV club controls. You were right." Alyssa's gaze tracked to the balcony, where the camera lens glinted like an extra eye. So it hadn't just been students snickering from the bleachers. Someone had handed the school her humiliation with an official stamp, and called it Spirit. The PE teacher, Mr. Harlan, drifted into the donor cluster, PTA treasurer badge catching the lights. "Dorothy would be proud," he told Caroline, invoking his mother and her maiden name like a passcode. Harlan Vale, 2 families whose decisions seemed to live forever in the mortar. The presentation was tidy. Alyssa felt something drop into place. The article from 1968. Evelyn had unfolded on their coffee table. The cursive notes on policy drafts. The sanctioned posts. This wasn't one girl's cruelty spinning out. It was a house with old wiring that kept shocking the same people. And everyone who could afford it called the Sparks tradition. Back in the quiet of the hallway, Coach angled her body to block Madison and Caroline from view, and turned to Alyssa with her conference smile. "If you keep your adjustments, we can discuss rotations," she said, every syllable sanded smooth. "Regionals require unity. Don't make this about you. To play us." "I didn't," Alyssa said, calm. The routine held. Coach's lips tightened. "Standards are standards," she replied, the phrase like a rubber stamp. "Remember, eligibility can get complicated. Grades, conduct, safety. Lots of boxes." It landed like a warning disguised as a reminder. Alyssa clocked the word eligibility and filed it beside legacy and tidy. Boxes to check. Boxes to weaponize. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the stadium lights, Madison's life glowed online, like a filtered advertisement. Jenna sent screenshots without commentary. Madison stepping into a white SUV with a ribbon decal from the Booster Club. Caroline behind a velvet rope at a donor mixer. A caption under a photo of Madison posing with a university scout. "Future Flyers program meets our very own captain." Legacy leadership. The scout's handshake looked practiced, the smile attached to a scholarship pipeline. Alyssa turned the phone face down. She'd learned to read images the way her father taught her to read water. Look for the current, not the shine. "Don't drink their light," Evelyn texted separately. "Bring yours." But the glare invaded school the next day. A new banner hung outside the gym. Regionals roster lock. Friday 4 p.m. Under it a sign-up sheet for uniform fittings. Each name already penned in neat cursive. The loops familiar. Alyssa found her own name in smaller letters, squeezed between lines as if it had been added after the fact. A pen ridge pressed through her row like someone had hesitated over the page. In chemistry, Mr. Harlan called roll and paused just long enough on Carter to make the air itch. "You're cutting it close with tardies," he said, though she'd slid into her seat at the bell. He made a mark. It sounded like a drop of oil in clear water, spread thin, hard to remove. Later, in the attendance portal, Jenna screenshotted the note, "Pattern of disruption, counselor review." Alyssa hadn't spoken once during class. At practice, coach's clipboard became a wall. We're moving Alyssa to alternate for regionals pending full compliance with appearance guidance and conduct review, she announced, monotone, as if reading weather. The words fell into the mat and bounced. Alyssa blinked. Conduct? Her voice didn't rise. She'd promised herself it wouldn't. Coach didn't meet her eyes. There have been concerns. She closed the clipboard. Conversation over. Madison's smile returned, polished to a new brightness. It's not personal, she said, voice pitying. Regionals are about optics and leadership. We can't risk unpredictability. Briar snorted like she could barely keep from clapping. Kelsey twisted her bow tighter. Alyssa stood still in the center of the mat, feeling the floors give beneath her shoes. It would be so easy to scream, easier still to fold. Instead she breathed. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Put the conduct concerns in writing, she said. Copy the district equity liaison. Coach's chin lifted a millimeter. Watch your tone. It's steady, Alyssa said, and it truly was. The next hours unspooled like a play, whose dialogue everyone else already knew. A guidance counselor gently asked Alyssa if she was sure cheer was the healthiest environment for her right now. The attendance office found a tardy from a week ago when she'd arrived at the bell. The spirit page posted a collage of team traditions with Madison centered and Alyssa at the edge, cropped close. Yet the more the system tightened, the more clearly Alyssa could see the mechanisms. The video hadn't been an accident. It was an instrument. The notes weren't random. They were rehearsed. The eligibility talk wasn't about safety. It was about control. She felt tired and furious, but also focused. She pulled the index card from her sock in the bathroom stall and read it like prayer. I will not negotiate my worth. I will not let an audience decide my next move. I will move with intention, not apology. That afternoon, Jenna met her by the trophy case, eyes darting. I did something, she said, voice low. Don't be mad. Alyssa braced. What? I propped the side office window with the old latch, Jenna said. You can hear through it when coach meets with the committee. They're in there now. Your name's on the agenda. Alyssa didn't love the sneak. She also didn't have the luxury of purity, while people rewrote her story behind closed doors. Stand guard, she said. You cough if anyone comes. They moved like shadows down the side corridor. The window latch stuck just as Jenna promised. A 1/4-inch gap, letting sound leak into the cinderblock hallway. Inside, papers shuffled. Ice clinked in a cup. Voices braided. Coaches cool and clipped. We can't have another spectacle at regionals. Optics matter. The donors were concerned by the rally. A woman's voice, Caroline. Smooth as glass. Then you know what needs to happen. Eligibility is coach's peer review. We'll handle the PR. Madison has a meeting with the university rep at halftime. She must be centered. A man Alyssa recognized as Vice Principal Kellogg. We can't be accused of bias. Caroline's laugh was almost gentle. Bias? We're talking about consistency. The standards exist. The video proved she courts attention. Someone edited that video, Coach said quietly. But there was no outrage in it, only the caution of someone speaking near a flame. And she adapted impressively. Adaptation isn't compliance, Caroline replied. We'll proceed like adults. Submit the roster with Alyssa as alternate. If she objects, we point to conduct notes and appearance guidance. Papers slid across a desk. File this parent concerns regarding sportsmanship. I drafted it for you. Alyssa's pulse thundered so loudly. She thought they might hear it through the wall. A rustle. Then Kellogg again. The roster lock is Friday at 4. Submit the official list to the league portal by 2. Release the team photo version with her at 3. So the crowd doesn't notice until it's done. Coach exhaled. You're asking me to lie. Caroline's voice cooled by a degree. I'm asking you to lead. We all know what fit looks like. Don't make this messy. The program depends on donor confidence. Silence. Then coach, I'll handle it. Jenna's breath hitched. Alyssa pressed her back to the cool wall. Palms flat, nails biting into her skin to keep from making a sound. The plan was meticulous because the system that protected it was practiced. It wasn't about one girl hating another. It was about a structure that preferred a certain face, a certain hair, a certain quiet. Footsteps scraped, chairs moved. The meeting wound down. Jenna and Alyssa slipped back into the main hallway. Hearts pounding, faces neutral. Students flowed around them, oblivious. They're going to submit 2 rosters, Jenna whispered. eyes wet. A public one with you, and the real one without you. By the time you know, it'll be locked. Alyssa swallowed the burn rising in her throat. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She saw the hill, the rope, the metronome. She felt Evelyn's bridge pin warm against her seam. The fight wasn't about fists. It was about precision. As they rounded the corner, Madison's laugh floated toward them, bright and careless, right before she said into her phone, clear as glass, "Don't worry. By Friday at 2 she won't exist on the roster." They walked out of school with the plan still ringing in their ears. Friday at 2. Erase her from the roster, and the late sun threw thin stripes across the pavement like bars. Alyssa drove home in a silence that wasn't empty. It was taut like a rope pulled tight between two boats. At a red light she pressed two fingers to her ankle, feeling the edge of the index card through her sock. "I will move with intention, not apology." The words steadied her hands on the wheel. Marcus was on the porch when she pulled in, sleeves rolled, a dish towel over his shoulder. He could read weather in the way she closed the car door. "Come in," he said, holding the screen a second longer than needed. A small ritual of care. Ellen sat at the table with a mug of tea, the steam curling like script in the air. Alyssa told them everything. Jenna's text, the window latch, the meeting. Caroline Vale's voice sang eligibility like a lever. Coach's quiet agreement. She kept her tone even, reporting like she'd practiced with Marcus. Facts, not flailing. When she finished, Marcus didn't pace or curse. He nodded once, eyes fixed on a middle distance she couldn't see. "Okay," he said, "then we need to sharpen what you're fighting. And who you're fighting for." "For?" Alyssa asked, thrown by the word. "For your future self," Evelyn answered, tapping the table near Alyssa's hand. "For whoever comes after you. But first, tell her your story, son." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from Alyssa like a man taking a sworn statement from himself. He rubbed his thumb along a nick in the tabletop. "You know pieces," he said. "Tonight you get the parts I've kept in the footlocker with the rest of the truth." Alyssa braced without tensing.
"Okay."
"I grew up being told that discipline would make me undeniable," he began. "I believed it like scripture. The Navy sharpened that belief, then tested it, until it bent." He smiled without humor. "First week of Budge S, drown-proofing. Hands tied, feet tied, instructors circling like seagulls that smelled challenge. When it was my turn to float, one instructor leaned down and said, 'Let's see if that extra muscle of yours weighs you down.' He meant my skin before he meant my body. He said it soft enough to skip across the top of the pool without making waves. I bobbed once, swallowed water, saw the ceiling blur. Then I heard my own voice, tiny, stubborn, say, 'Square your breath.' I did. I passed." He wrote borderline on my of. Alyssa felt her jaw set. "Did you report him?" Marcus shook his head. "To who?" "The ocean," he exhaled. "Later, on a training op, I flagged a rip current on the chart. Told the OIC our insertion point would shove us sideways and eat our air." He looked at my trident, then at my face, and said, "We train to go through, not around." He assigned me safety swimmer, the role you give the strongest body with the least voice. His eyes drifted to the window, the night drawing down. We hit the water, current took us hard. Two new guys panicked. One blew his I turned us lateral, hand on each of their vests, kicking like a machine, counting 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out while they cursed and cried, and promised me beers I didn't want. We made it. The OIC wrote in his after-action. Quick thinking ensured mission integrity. He meant he put his name on the line that counted. Evelyn's mouth flattened into a thin, knowing line. Alyssa felt heat rise in her chest. "Did you say anything?" "I wrote a memo," Marcus said. "Short, precise. Attached my tide notes. No adjectives." The XO replied, "No ill intent found. Good to see teamwork. That phrase, 'no ill intent,' will follow you into rooms that don't want to admit harm." He rubbed his index finger and thumb together, remembering the paper. A month later they took a team photo for a base newsletter. Everybody smiled. My face was there when we shot it. When it ran, the crop shaved me off at the shoulder. They said it was the layout. I kept the original in my footlocker so I wouldn't forget which frame was true. Alyssa swallowed. "You stayed." "I did," he said, "because quitting would have been their story for me, not mine. I found a different way to win." He leaned back, expression gentler now. 2 years later, a Category 1 storm nailed the coast during a joint exercise. We had to evacuate a training site, Maps flooded. Radio spotty. The OIC who'd dismissed me had a panic I recognized. Eyes too wide, breath too fast. I put my hand on his back the way a teammate once did for me. When panic ate my chest and I said, "Feel your ribs. They're still there." Then I quietly took the route I'd drawn, led 6 men out through a lateral break in the flood. We made it. The XO shook my hand and shook the OIC's harder for the camera. Marcus smiled at the absurdity without bitterness. The following week they asked me to write a module on rip current decision-making. The module carried no byline, but for years kids coming through learned the move I'd mapped under somebody else's signature. That's not fair, but it's a win. Sometimes a win looks like room you built that they pretend was always there. Evelyn set her mug down softly. "Tell her the other part." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "The part I don't love to say," he admitted. "On my last deployment, the base newsletter launched a fundraiser to replace gym lighting for the youth program. The old lights flickered like bad memory. I sent money through an anonymous fund I started with 2 friends. Lighthouse. No names, no plaques, just better light." He looked at Alyssa, eyes wet but clear. "Those are the lights that made you look glorious at the pep rally. Those are also the lights that made the edit of your humiliation crisp. I gave the school light. The wrong people used it." Alyssa blinked. The twist slid into place with a thud. Love turned tool turned weapon. "You didn't know," she said, even as her throat tightened. "No," he said, "but I know now." He leaned forward. "And I will not let that be the end of the story of that money. If we need a lawyer, Lighthouse pays. If we need our own camera so they can't twist the frame, Lighthouse buys it. If we need entry fees for an independent competition because a committee chokes your spot, Lighthouse covers. Not because we're trying to outspend rot, because we don't let rot decide where we plant." Alyssa stared at him, the room tilting in a new direction. "You kept that from me." "I kept it from everyone," Marcus said, a rueful smile flickering. "My pride thought anonymity was purity. My daughter needs army, not secrets." She reached across the table and squeezed his forearm. Her hand didn't feel small on him, the way it had when she was little. It felt like a link in a chain that was finally visible. "I don't want to become bitter," she said. "I don't want to start measuring every room by how much it hates me."
"Good," he said. "Neither do I. That's where discipline saves your heart. You set your rules before their noise writes them for you."
He stood, crossed to the hall, and returned with the dented footlocker. From beneath folded uniforms he drew a manila envelope. The flap soft from being opened, closed, opened again. He slid out a letter with a government header and laid it on the table. The language was precise and cold. "After review of the alleged bias in assignment and recognition, this office finds insufficient evidence of discriminatory intent." Below, a line that had once made him laugh to keep from breaking. "Recommend additional mentorship to ensure smoother integration." "They told me to find a mentor," he said. "So I did. A master chief named Rollins. First black man I saw with shoulders that relaxed in any room. He told me something I wish someone had told me at 16. If the frame is too small, don't set yourself on fire to fit. Build a bigger frame. Then make them ask to borrow it." Alyssa felt something loosen between her ribs, grief and permission letting go of each other at the same time. "I love him," she said, surprising herself. "Even if I've never met him. He retired to Florida and grows peppers too hot for sense," Marcus said, a ghost of a laugh. "I'll invite him to Thanksgiving." Ellen reached into her cardboard box and plucked the bridge pin, repinning it on Alyssa's hoodie seam as if crowning a doll. "You see the path now," she said. "You're not screaming at wind. You're mapping currents." Alyssa nodded slowly. "So what do I do before Friday?" "They'll submit 2 rosters. They'll publish the pretty lie. They'll call any objection disruption, and point to boxes they drew." Marcus slid a legal pad between them, and drew 3 small squares, then an arrow that walked around them. "We go around," he said. "First, we shore up your eligibility. Ask your teachers for printed attendance records for this week. Time-stamped. If anyone refuses, we document the refusal. Second, we compel clarity. Email coach tonight requesting written criteria used for alternate designation and a copy of the appearance guidance with dates and authorship. CC the principal and equity liaison. Third, we control the narrative without a scene. We record your routines cleanly tomorrow, 1 on the mezzanine from our own camera, 1 from floor level. If they delete you on paper, we show you on film." He tapped the last box, "and we prepare a plan B." "Independent competition," Evelyn said, her eyes already years down the road. You're the routine, not the roster. Alyssa exhaled, the breath deep enough to feel the bottom of her lungs. I thought winning today meant keeping my spot on their team. Winning might mean redefining team, Marcus said. I'd prefer the clean win. They blink. You compete. System learns. But I plan for all weather. She looked at the letter again, the great seal in black ink, the neat denial of intent, the recommendation for mentorship, like a pat on the head. She wasn't him, but she could feel the seam of their stories pulling tight, stitching across decades. Dad, she said quietly, does the anger ever go away? It changes shape, he said.
You want it to be a sword. Better to make it a plow.
Swords make a mess that someone else uses as proof you were dangerous. Plows leave rows. Food grows in rows. She laughed, a small incredulous sound at the image. A plow? I'm old, he said, deadpan. I've earned my metaphors. They all smiled. And for a brief, exquisite second, the house felt easy. The second passed. The work waited. Alyssa pulled her phone close and opened a new email to Coach. Her fingers didn't shake. Dear Coach Whitmore, she typed. Given the conversations about regionals eligibility, I'm requesting the written criteria used in determining alternates and the dates authors of the current appearance guidance. Please include any conduct concerns with timestamps so I can respond with accuracy. I'm committed to representing the school with discipline and dignity. Respectfully, Alyssa Carter. She CC'd the principal, the equity liaison Evelyn had named, and after a beat, herself at a separate address she'd created that morning. Alyssa. Marcus watched her hit send and nodded. That's the work, he said. Quiet, precise, impossible to frame as chaos. Her phone buzzed immediately. A read receipt from the principal's office. Another from the equity liaison's auto reply. Thank you for your report. A case number will follow. A small bureaucratic light flickered on. Alyssa looked up at Marcus, her face open, brave, and still very young. Am I enough for this? You already were, he said. You didn't need their roster to make it true. The clock over the stove ticked into the clear part of evening, when daylight thins and shadows stand up straighter. Evelyn rose and kissed Alyssa's crown, lingering a second longer than usual. Remember your breath? She murmured. And when you feel small, picture your whole height. Alyssa nodded. The hill, the rope, the metronome, all of it slid into place like a scaffold inside her chest. Marcus stood, the dish towel back over his shoulder like a banner, and his voice dropped into the tone he used before dawn runs, and hard truths. Listen, he said, each word exact. This next battle isn't about them. It's about who you decide to become. The Friday of regionals arrived like a storm that had been gathering all week. The air outside the school felt electric. Students buzzing with excitement and parents streaming in with banners and cameras. For Alyssa, every step toward the bus felt deliberate, like she was walking across a field she knew was mined. The roster had been posted in the main hallway that morning. Her name tucked in with alternates, a quiet demotion disguised as bureaucracy. But she wasn't off the floor, not yet. She pressed 2 fingers to her sock, feeling the edge of Marcus's index card against her ankle. I will move with intention, not apology. The words steadied her against the whispers she heard as she passed. The ride to the competition venue was a blur of forced laughter and spray-tan fumes. Madison and her orbit of allies filled the bus with practiced chatter about our spotlight moment, tossing glances at Alyssa like darts. Kelsey leaned forward just enough to let a hissed phrase slip through. Don't trip over your afro this time. The squad giggled, muffled behind pom-poms. Alyssa didn't flinch. She breathed, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, and stared at the horizon rolling past the window. The venue was a cavernous arena, its polished floor glowing beneath overhead lights. Banners for rival schools hung from the rafters, each team clustered in their corner, stretching, chanting, perfecting. The Eagles filed into their spot. Madison's mother, Caroline, dressed in pearl earrings and confidence, stood near the judge's table, laughing with a coordinator. Alyssa clocked the angle. Her fingerprints were everywhere, from the roster to the narrative. Warm-ups began. Alyssa ran through her motions, her body a quiet engine of discipline. Rope climbs echoed in her stance, hill runs in her endurance, Marcus's metronome in her timing. Each move was an answer to the doubt they had scripted for her. Then came the first attempt at sabotage. As Alyssa stretched her hamstrings, Briar accidentally kicked her water bottle, spilling half across the mat. Oops, she said, voice syrupy. Alyssa bent, picked it up without a word, and swapped bottles with Jenna, who had brought a spare. Her pulse ticked, but her breath stayed even. The second attempt was less subtle. Just before the squad lined up, Madison leaned close, whispering with a smile wide enough for the cameras, "Don't choke out there." Judges love composure. Alyssa met her eyes for one steady second, then turned to the floor, body squared. She didn't waste air on words. The announcer's voice boomed, calling the Eagles onto the floor. The crowd roared, but it wasn't just noise, it was expectation, pressure, the collective gaze that wanted to see shine or failure. The music hit, and the routine launched. From the first count, Alyssa felt the current. Her body moved like the drills had carved into her bones. When Madison wobbled slightly on a heel stretch, Alyssa's base grip steadied without a tremor. When Kelsey half-released on a stunt, Alyssa's arms locked like steel, saving the pyramid. Her discipline wasn't dramatic. It was invisible resilience that made the whole team look stronger. But midway through, the sabotage sharpened. On the basket toss, Alyssa felt her flyer tilt sideways. A release timed too soon. She inhaled, shifted her weight, and caught the girl square in her chest, absorbing the shock without collapse. The crowd gasped at the near miss, but the stunt reset smooth. To the untrained eye, it looked flawless. Only the bases knew who had saved it. Madison's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then came Alyssa's turn at the back tuck, the same move she'd landed at practice. Her muscles remembered the garage, the rope burns on her hands, the echo of Marcus's voice. "Trust the floor," she launched. Rotation tight, landing clean, arms up. The roar from the stands surged, drowning out every whisper. It wasn't just applause, it was recognition. Madison pushed harder, trying to center herself, flashing smiles to the judges. Arms exaggerated, but the crowd's energy tilted. Their cheers had rhythm now, echoing Alyssa's movements. Each stomp felt like it was beating back the narrative Madison's mother had written. As the routine built to the final pyramid, tension crackled. Alyssa crouched as base again, muscles coiled. Madison climbed to the top, crown of the formation. For a beat, Alyssa saw the intent in Madison's eyes. The same malice from the locker room, sharpened into a plan. Madison shifted her weight wrong, deliberate, trying to send the structure tilting. But Alyssa had trained for currents, for storms, for the weight of men twice her size. Her stance widened, her arms locked, her breath anchored. The pyramid held. Madison's sabotage turned into her own wobble. Alyssa steadied the team beneath her, her unseen strength the only reason the formation stayed intact. When the music cut, the squad hit their final pose. Alyssa's bow was still tied across her torn seam, a flash of defiance now woven into uniform. The crowd erupted. Students stomped. Parents cheered. Rival teams whispered. Back at the judges' table, pens scribbled, heads bent together. Alyssa caught a glimpse, one judge leaning toward another, hand covering her mouth. Their eyes flicked toward Alyssa, then back to the score sheet. Whispers passed like current. The team filed off the floor, breathless, sweat streaking makeup. Madison's jaw was tight, her mother's face even tighter. Alyssa didn't smile wide. She didn't need to. Her breathing was calm, her spine straight. She had moved with intention, not apology. For the first time, Madison's authority didn't feel untouchable. And Caroline Vale, standing near the judges, looked as though she had just watched her carefully drawn frame shift on its hinges. Behind the table, the judges leaned close, their whispers sharp. One tapped the score sheet with a pen, another shook her head, lips tight. And Alyssa, watching from the edge of the floor, felt the question slice through the noise. Had she done enough to win despite the odds, or would the system still decide her fate? The arena buzzed as the Eagles filed off the mat, the crowd's applause still echoing in the rafter. Alyssa's body pulsed with adrenaline, her breath steady but deep, each inhale tinged with the metallic tang of victory. She knew she had done everything possible. She had steadied every sabotage, turned every trap into proof of her strength. Yet the whispers at the judges' table lingered in her mind like shadows, sharp and undecided. Madison adjusted her bow with a tight smile, her posture stiff with strain. "Good job, team," she said through clenched teeth, though her eyes cut toward Alyssa with venom. Behind her, Caroline Vale moved with deliberate grace toward the judges, her pearls catching the light, her smile as polished as glass. Alyssa recognized the choreography control wasn't only about routines on the mat. It was about narrative spun in back rooms. But the night carried its own current. When the announcer returned to the mic ready to stall with sponsor acknowledgments before scores, a sudden ripple of commotion cut through the noise. A student from the AV club, his badge still dangling from his hoodie, stumbled forward carrying a flash drive. He whispered urgently to a staff coordinator, who frowned and leaned toward the judges. Screens flickered, murmurs rose, and then it happened. The jumbotron above the arena lit up, its hum filling the space as a video began to play. At first the audience expected highlights, but what appeared wasn't a polished cheer montage. It was raw locker room footage, grainy but damning. Madison's voice rang out clear as a bell. "Uniform check, girls. Don't want any accidents." Laughter followed. Then Breyer's mocking, "Uniforms fit better on girls with manageable hair." The video cut again, this time to practice footage spliced from the mezzanine. Kelsey releasing early, Madison leaning wrong, Breyer smirking when Alyssa steadied the stunt, each clip threaded together like evidence in a case file. Gasps erupted. Parents shifted in their seats, whispers turning into outrage. A teacher muttered, "My God," loud enough to be caught on the crowd mic. Madison's face drained of color. She lurched toward the AV booth, but it was too late. The footage rolled on, ending with the shot of Alyssa mid-performance, torn seam tied with her bow, landing her back tuck clean while the crowd roared. The contrast was brutal. Cruelty against resilience, malice against grace. When the video cut to black, the silence was deafening. Then it broke, not into applause, but into shouts. Parents demanded answers. Community members pointed, some toward the cheerleaders, others toward Caroline Vale, who stood frozen, her carefully sculpted smile cracked. One father rose to his feet. "So this is what's been happening?" His voice carried, rough with anger. "We cheer for excellence while kids tear each other down, and adults protect it?" His words found echoes in the crowd, more parents chiming in, teachers murmuring. The system Madison had hidden within suddenly had light blazing through its cracks. Caroline moved fast, stepping forward, hands raised as if to calm. "Let's not overreact. Teenagers make mistakes." But Evelyn's voice, clear and strong from the bleachers, cut her off. "Mistakes don't edit themselves. Mistakes don't plot in whispers. What we saw was cruelty, and cruelty with protection behind it." The crowd's energy shifted again, fury sharpening into focus. The judges conferred, faces tight, their pens moving briskly. One of them stood, speaking into the mic. "Given this evidence, we will be reviewing eligibility not only for this competition, but for future events. Sabotage is grounds for disqualification." A fresh ripple tore through the arena. Shock, shame, whispers of scandal. Madison's name wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. Every eye in the building knew. Coach Whitmore's clipboard hung limp at her side, her lips pressed into a pale line. For the first time, Alyssa saw hesitation on her face, not indifference, but the weight of complicity. Back in the holding area, Madison hissed at Breyer and Kelsey, her voice no longer sweet but jagged. "Who leaked that? Who's against us?" Her hands trembled as she pulled at her bow. Kelsey wouldn't meet her eyes. Breyer stared at the floor. For the first time their hierarchy cracked, fear replacing loyalty. Alyssa stood slightly apart, Jenna at her side. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth had done the work, but her chest burned with something heavier than victory. It was vindication laced with sorrow. This wasn't just about her. It was about every girl who had ever been whispered about, cropped out of photos, pushed to the margin. The awards ceremony carried a new gravity. When the Eagles were called, their score was lower than expected. Sabotage penalties and deductions dragging them down. They didn't win first place, but when Alyssa's name was read individually for a special recognition of resilience and sportsmanship, the arena erupted. Students who had laughed weeks ago now cheered her name. Teachers clapped. Even rival teams stomped their feet. Madison didn't move. Her face was a mask cracking by the second, while her mother whispered furiously to anyone who would listen. But this time, the system wasn't covering, it was crumbling. On the bus ride home, silence pressed heavy. Madison sat rigid, staring out the window, phone buzzing non-stop with notifications. The footage had gone beyond the arena. Clips posted, reshared, already climbing into hundreds of thousands of views. Her empire of whispers had turned into a stage of shame. Alyssa leaned against the window, the cool glass steady against her temple. She didn't smile. but a weight inside her eased. The truth had spoken louder than she ever could. When the bus pulled into the school parking lot, Principal Rollins waited at the curb, flanked by teachers and the district equity liaison. His expression was stern, controlled, but the air around him buzzed with the gravity of accountability. Madison was called forward first. Alyssa watched as the whispers that once protected her flipped into scrutiny. The girl who had laughed over scissors and staged sabotage now stood small in front of authority, her mother's protests drowned out by the clarity of evidence. But before Alyssa could slip away into the night, Principal Rollins turned to her. His voice carried enough for the others to hear. "Alyssa Carter," he said, "we'd like you to speak at Monday's school assembly. Students need to hear from someone who chose dignity over destruction." The words landed heavy, not as praise but as responsibility. Alyssa felt the eyes of the squad, the teachers, the parents. She thought of Marcus's stories, Evelyn's warnings, the generations that had walked through storms before her. She thought of the card in her sock, the bridge pin on her hoodie. Speaking meant opening wounds in public, risking backlash, carrying weight that wasn't hers alone. Staying silent meant letting the moment pass, letting others tell her story for her. The night air was cool, the hum of streetlights steady. Alyssa met her father's eyes. He didn't nod or shake his head. He let the choice be hers. Alyssa's breath steadied, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, as she whispered to herself, "If I speak, I can't take it back." And the question loomed larger than the arena. Would she take the microphone, or let her silence speak instead? Monday arrived with the kind of brightness that felt almost suspicious. Sun through thin clouds, the gym floor gleaming, as if nothing ugly had ever happened there. Alyssa stood in the doorway with her notes folded small in her palm. The microphone on its slender stand looked like a test disguised as metal. Marcus touched her shoulder, the squeeze firm and brief. "Feel your ribs," he murmured. "They're still there." Elliman tucked a loose curl behind Alyssa's ear and let it spring back. "Speak the truth plain," she said. "Plain travels farther." The bleachers filled, students, teachers, parents, donors in their good jackets. Coach stood off to the side, clipboard pressed to her stomach like a shield. Madison sat with the squad, eyes on her phone, a brittle composure hardening her mouth. Principal Rollins stepped to the mic first, throat cleared, words measured. "We're here to learn," he said, "to listen. Alyssa, the floor is yours." She walked out to the center circle, the same painted emblem she'd crossed 100 times, and stopped where the light pooled. The hum of the building pressed in. She lifted the mic, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, not loud, not small, just steady. "I want to start with a breath," she said. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. With me. 1,000 lungs filled and paused, and in that hush the gym changed shape. She waded through the exhale, a soft wave across the room, and then began. "Someone cut my hair in the school," she said. In a locker room, a sentence landed like a stone in a pond. No preface, no apology. They called it standards. They said it was for the team. When I picked my curls up off the tile, I thought I was gathering shame. I was actually gathering evidence. Murmurs trembled along the bleachers, and then stilled. Alyssa's hands didn't shake. She held the mic low, like it wasn't there to make her larger, only audible. "This isn't only about hair," she continued. "It's about permission, about who gets to take up space, and who gets told to shrink for symmetry." Her gaze moved over the crowd, teachers who had looked away, students who had laughed and then clapped, parents whose faces carried fresh outrage, and old denial in equal measure. It's about the words we use, neat, tame, professional, words that pretend to clean but erase. She paused, the silence an instrument she knew how to play now. "I want to tell you what happened after," she said. "I ran hills in the dark with my dad. I climbed a rope that burned my hands. I counted breath in squares. I learned 3 rules." She unfolded the small index card, the edges soft from her ankle. "I will not negotiate my worth. I will not let an audience decide my next move. I will move with intention, not apology." She lifted her eyes from the card and found Marcus in the 3rd row. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His hands were still. "Some people helped me," she said. "Some helped late." Her gaze found Jenna near the aisle, eyes wet but unblinking. "Hinges swing late sometimes, but they swing. I'm grateful for those who did the right thing after doing nothing first." A few heads bowed. A few didn't. "Some of you asked me to laugh it off," Alyssa said. To be a good sport. Satire. You said. Spirit. But the video edited from the mezzanine wasn't a joke. It was a weapon. Cameras built for safety and memory became a tool for humiliation because adults allowed it. That's not student drama, that's culture. The room held still. The AV club advisor stared at the floor. Mr. Harlan's jaw tightened. In the donor section, Caroline Vale's smile thinned to the point of invisible. Alyssa hesitated, then chose the truth that would surprise the room most. Here's a twist you don't know, she said. The lights that made my humiliation look so clear, they were donated anonymously by my father and 2 friends because they believed in this school. Those lights were used against me, and then they lit the truth. She let the sentence breathe, its edges soft and sharp at once. Marcus's face didn't change, only his eyes grew warmer, acceptance passing between them like a small private bridge. I'm not here to ask for applause, she said. I got that at a pep rally, and applause doesn't fix systems. I'm asking for different things. She lifted a page from her notes, but didn't read it. She knew it by heart. First, retire the appearance guidance that polices culture under the word neat. Replace it with language about safety and function, not conformity. Second, take the admin keys to the spirit accounts out of private hands, publish who runs them, and for what purpose. Cameras are for safety, not shaming. Third, when harm happens, stop saying no ill intent. Say what it is, then fix it with receipt. She turned slightly. A soft pivot that included the squad without isolating them. To my team, she said, I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to stop confusing power with leadership. A captain is more than a title. A leader steadies the pyramid whether there are cameras or not. Madison's eyes flashed, but her face offered nothing. Alyssa's voice lowered. I want to say thank you to 2 people. She lifted her chin toward Evelyn. To my grandmother, who taught me the difference between their mirror and mine, who marched so I could do this with a microphone, instead of a megaphone in the street. Evelyn's head dipped once. A benediction. And to my father, Alyssa said, who taught me that discipline is an exit, not a cage, who put a metronome in my head when the room wanted my heartbeat to race. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they were steady water. She returned her gaze to the crowd. I'm not perfect, she said. I got scared. I wanted to quit. I thought being small would make me safe. It didn't. What helped me wasn't toughness. It was practice. Breath on the corners. Rope between my feet. Silence as a muscle until it was time to speak. She let the mic hang at her side for a beat, then lifted it once more. Racism isn't always a slur shouted in a hallway, she said. It's the smirk that passes as a joke, the note typed in a teacher's font, the policy written in cursive that looks pretty while it punishes. It's the crop on a photo that cuts a person out and calls it layout. A rustle moved through the staff section, guilt as audible as paper. You don't have to be the one holding the scissors to be part of the cut. You can be the frame. You can also be the bridge. She glanced up at the rafters, at the cameras, at the banners. So here's my call to action. Every day ask yourself, who's being cropped? Who isn't in the frame? If you find yourself saying it's not a big deal, ask who told you that. And if you're tempted to call cruelty spirit, remember spirit without integrity is just noise. The gym had gone so quiet the exit signs seemed loud. Alyssa inhaled and exhaled with the count she could do in her sleep. I was invited to speak because something wrong happened to me, she said. I'm speaking because I want less of this in the next girl's life. When you see it, small or big, say it, stop it, fix it. Not for a headline, for the person. She lowered the mic. A second of silence, stretched like a held note. Then a sound rose, not a roar, not a whoop, but a wave of applause that began at the back and moved forward, deliberate and full. It wasn't the pep rally's thrill. It was recognition. It was agreement from people who would have to change to keep clapping. Coach stepped forward then, unexpected, eyes wet in a way Alyssa had never seen. She didn't take the mic. She took off the whistle that had hung at her neck for years and held it in her palm. I'm sorry, she said, voice unamplified but clear. I wrote language that hurt. I let Tidy stand in for fair. I'll be stepping back while the district reviews. That's not absolution, it's accountability. A ripple moved through the bleachers. Surprise, relief, suspicion. It didn't fix history. It marked the map. Alyssa didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She nodded once. Not to absolve but to acknowledge the work beginning where the apology ended. Principal Rollins returned to the stand, hands open. "Thank you, Alyssa," he said. "We'll publish new policy drafts this week. Student committee seats will be open. The spirit accounts will move under school oversight. Anyone with footage or messages, bring them. We're done calling this girls being girls." The applause swelled again, and Alyssa stepped back from the mic, air cool on her face. She felt light and anchored at once, as if she'd set something heavy down where everyone could see it and it no longer belonged to her alone. In the quiet that followed, she reached into her bag, not for notes, not for proof, for a thin, soft head wrap, the one Evelyn had given her. She tied it once, twice, fingers sure, not to hide, to crown. Then she slipped it off again, let her short curls spring free, and tied them back with the same spare bow she'd used the night of the torn seam. She walked to the edge of the mat, the same painted emblem, the same lights, a different frame. She set one foot on the wood, and then the other, shoulders squared, head high. Alyssa tied her short curls back, stepped proudly onto the mat, and stood there, not a victim, not an exception, but a symbol of resilience, inviting the room and the year to meet her at full height. Alyssa's story isn't just hers, it's a mirror of what too many face in silence. What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Share this story, talk about it, argue about it, because silence is how injustice survives. The next chapter doesn't get written by Alyssa alone, it gets written by us.